If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Darlene Washington, and I've been a ranger at Okefenokee Swamp for 4 years now. Every morning starts the same way. Me, my canoe, and the foggy breath of an ancient swamp waking up around me. This morning, the cypress knees poke through the dark water like bony fingers, and the Spanish moss hangs down, making ghostly shapes in the early light. My paddle barely makes a sound as I glide through the water. That's how I like it, quiet enough to hear the swamp's secrets. The air smells like wet earth and plant life, rich and a little sweet. Frogs croak their morning songs, and somewhere far off, birds call to each other. It's like the oldest song, in America, played every day in this huge blackwater swamp. I'm 32 years old, and the first black female ranger they've ever had in this district. Could have picked a busier park, one with more people and fancy trails, but after all the side eyes and "we're not sure you're a good fit" talks at other parks, this wild place feels right. Here, the animals don't care what I look like. The trees don't whisper behind my back. It's August 1976, America's big birthday year, 200 years old, and everyone's wearing red, white, and blue. The whole country's talking about saving the environment now, but this swamp, it hasn't changed much since dinosaurs walked around. That's what I love about it. I stop paddling. When I spot a flash of yellow in the trees, a prothonotary warbler, I slowly reach for my camera, trying not to scare it away. Click. Got it. These little moments, just me and nature, that's why I do this job. The radio at my hip crackles, then goes silent. It's been acting up for days now. Not great timing since I'm heading to the deepest part of my patrol route, about 12 miles from where any car can reach. But I'm used to being on my own out here. As I round the bend, I see old Thomas Woodall's fishing boat tied to a cypress stump. The 71-year-old has lived by this swamp his whole life, just like his daddy and granddaddy. Before him, "Morning, Ranger Washington," he calls, his voice raspy from years of smoking hand-rolled cigarettes. "You heading out far today?" "Just the usual route, Mr. Woodall," I answer, guiding my canoe alongside his boat. His weathered face looks troubled. "Been strange happenings past few days. Gators acting funny, moving away from the center all at once, like something scared 'em. Never seen nothing like it in all my years." I frown. I've noticed it too. Alligators don't just leave their territories for no reason. 4 years watching these waters, and I've never seen them behave this way. "And there's that cold spot," Thomas adds, rubbing his arms. "Middle of August, hot as blazes everywhere else, but paddle through Reed Creek, and it feels like November." He's right. Despite the summer heat making my uniform stick to my back, there's a weird chill rising from certain parts of the water. It creates thick fog that seems to swallow up sounds. Thank him for the warning and continue on my way, my hand touching the knife at my belt for reassurance. It was my grandfather's, handmade with a bone handle worn smooth from years of use in these very waters. When I hold it, I feel connected to him and all the knowledge he shared with me about this place. The fog grows thicker as I paddle deeper into the swamp, and that strange feeling creeps up my spine again, like the water itself is watching me, waiting for something. And I remember my grandfather's warnings about places in this swamp where the water has no bottom. As I paddle deeper into the swamp, my mind drifts back to when I was a little girl. My grandfather would take me out in his old wooden boat, showing me places most folks never see. "Pay attention, Darlene," he'd say, his gentle hands guiding mine on the paddle. "This swamp has been here longer than people, and it's got secrets." He taught me which berries were safe to eat, how to spot an alligator nest, and where the dry land was hidden under what looked like solid plant cover. But some days, he'd suddenly turn the boat around for no reason I could see. "There are places where the water has no bottom," he'd whisper, Places that weren't there yesterday and might be gone tomorrow. The maps don't show them, and that's on purpose. I shake off the memory and focus on my paddling. My arms are strong from years of moving through these waters. People who meet me in town are always surprised by my handshake. For such a small lady, you've got quite a grip, they say. But out here, strength matters. The letter I got yesterday is still bothering me. Another science journal saying no to my research on how the swamp ecosystem works together. 4 years of careful notes, water samples and animal tracking, all dismissed with a form letter. We regret to inform you. Yeah, I bet they do. I pull my waterproof journal from my pack and write down the water temperature. It's 10 degrees colder than it should be. For weeks now, I've noticed patches of water turning black as ink. Not just dark, but completely black, like it's swallowing the light. Ranger Washington, wait up. I turn to see Peter Donahue's canoe coming around the bend. At 25, he's the newest ranger, fresh out of training and full of textbook knowledge, but short on experience. His red life vest is still shiny and new, and I can see the field guide bulging in his pocket. He checks it every 5 minutes. Morning, Donahue, I say as he pulls alongside me. Thought you were working the visitor center today. Chief switched. Me to patrol after that missing persons report came in. He's trying to sound casual, but I can hear the excitement in his voice. First real action he's seen. What missing persons? I ask, suddenly alert. Family of 4, Johnsons. They were camping on Pine Island. Didn't check in this morning, and their car's still at the South Dock. I frown. Pine Island is deep in the swamp, and with the strange things happening lately, my stomach tightens with worry. We need to find them before dark, I say, checking my watch. Storm's coming too. I notice Peter looking confused at his map. Something wrong? I could swear Pine Island was farther east on the map, he says. I look where he's pointing, and a chill runs through me that has nothing to do with the cold water. He's right. According to the map, we should be paddling through solid land right now, but instead, we're in a channel I've traveled 100 times. My granddaddy said some parts of this swamp weren't meant to be mapped, I say quietly. Places that change. Peter laughs nervously. Islands don't just move, Ranger Washington. But I'm not so sure anymore. Something feels off about the water. Currents too. They're flowing against each other in ways that shouldn't be possible. Water doesn't flow uphill, and it doesn't split around invisible objects, but that's exactly what I'm seeing. Dark clouds gather overhead as we paddle faster toward Pine Island. Lightning flashes in the distance, and for a split second, I see something in the water that doesn't make sense. A perfect circle of stillness in the choppy water. We need to hurry, I tell Peter, trying to keep my voice steady. That family's been out here too long already. What I don't say is what's really scaring me. For the first time in my life, I'm not sure I know exactly where we are in the swamp. The map in my head, built over years of exploring these waters, suddenly doesn't match what's in front of my eyes. And if I can't trust my own knowledge of these waters, we might all be in serious trouble. We reach Pine Island an hour later, and right away, I know something is wrong. The Johnsons' tent is still set up, bright blue against the green trees. Their cooler sits open, and a small camping stove has a pot of beans on it. Hello? Park Rangers, Peter calls out, his voice bouncing off the trees. No answer comes back. Step carefully onto the shore, my eyes scanning everything. The beans in the pot are still warm. A paperback book lies open on a camp chair, like someone just set it down to grab a drink. 4 pairs of shoes are lined up neatly outside the tent. It's like they just vanished, Peter whispers. That's when I see the footprints. They lead from the water's edge up onto the shore, wet footprints that stop suddenly, like the people making them just disappeared into thin air. I kneel down to look closer. The prints are filled with water that doesn't seem to be drying even. In the humid air, Ranger Washington. Peter's voice shakes a little. You need to see this. I join him at the water's edge. More footprints lead from the shore into the water, but they're impossible. They walk straight onto the water's surface and keep going. Not into the water, on top of it. Before I can make sense of this, a rustling sound comes from the bushes. To our left, we both turn, hands going to our belts. But it's not the missing family, it's snakes, dozens of them, slithering across our path in a hurry. Water moccasins, rat snakes, even a few cottonmouths, all species that normally avoid each other, moving together like they're fleeing something. I've never seen them do that, Peter says, backing away. Me neither, I admit. Something spooked them bad. We check the rest of the small island, but find no sign of the Johnsons, no struggle, no blood, nothing broken or damaged, just an empty campsite and those impossible footprints. As we return to our canoes, I notice something that makes my skin crawl. The water in a narrow channel between two cypress trees is flowing uphill. Not much, just a gentle rise, but water doesn't do that. Can't do that. Peter, I say slowly, look at the water by that log. He stares, then rubs his eyes. That's not possible. The water climbs up the trunk of a cypress tree like it's solid, then falls back down as drops of black rain. Not normal brown swamp water, but pitch black, like ink or oil. We push off from the island quickly, both of us feeling the need to move. That's when I spot something floating in a perfectly round pool of water, a small teddy bear, pink with a purple ribbon. I paddle over and reach for it, but stop when I notice the water in the pool doesn't reflect the sky above. It reflects nothing, like a hole cut out of the world. That's Jenny Johnson's bear, Peter says. Her mom showed me a picture when she filed the report. She never goes anywhere without it. I try the radio again, but instead of static or voices, we hear what sounds like water bubbling, then a faint sound that might be singing, far away and underwater. What is that? Peter asks, leaning closer to hear. I don't know, I say, clicking through channels. Every one has the same bubbling sound. To test something, I pick up a small stick and drop it into that strange round pool. It doesn't splash. It makes no sound at all. It just disappears, like the water goes down forever. Peter drops a pebble in another spot, and it sinks normally with a small plop. We need to get back and bring a search team, I decide, trying to sound more confident than I feel. We turn our canoes around, but somehow the channel we came through is gone, closed, up by a wall of cypress trees that I swear weren't there before. There was a way through right here, Peter insists, checking his compass. The needle spins wildly, pointing in all directions. I pull out my GPS unit, but it shows us in 3 different locations at once, all miles apart. One location is actually in the Gulf of Mexico. Something's wrong with all our equipment, I say, trying to stay calm. That's when I feel it, something huge moving under our canoes. The water bulges upward, forming a temporary island of mud and roots before sinking back down. No splash, no wake, just a silent rearranging of the swamp itself. I dip my hand in the water to check the temperature, and when I pull it out, tiny circle marks cover my skin, like little suction cups held on for a second. They fade after a few moments, but the feeling of being touched lingers. Let's try the East Channel, I suggest, pointing to a gap in the trees. That should take us back toward the ranger station. But after 20 minutes of paddling, we end up back at Pine Island again, coming from a completely different direction than we left. That's not possible, Peter says, panic creeping into his voice. We were going straight east. We should be miles from here by now. I look up at the darkening sky. The storm is getting closer, and we're going in circles in a swamp that no longer follows the rules I've known all my life. We need to try again, I say firmly. Follow me closely. Don't lose sight of my canoe, no matter what. As we push off once more, I can't shake the feeling that the water itself is watching us, herding us, playing with us like a cat with mice. And worse, I'm starting to think it has the missing family already. The fog gets thicker as we paddle, turning, the world grey and silent. Through a break in the mist, I see something that makes my heart skip. A long, snake-like shape moves through the water, but it's way too big to be an alligator. It has bumps along its back like a row of small hills. And it moves with purpose, not like an animal just swimming around. I put my finger to my lips, signaling Peter to be quiet. We both freeze, paddles held above the water. The shape disappears beneath the surface, but I can't shake the feeling we're being followed. Every time I look behind us, ripples appear in the water, keeping the same distance from our canoes. When we stop, they stop too. What was that thing? Peter whispers when we start moving again. I don't know, I admit. I've never seen anything like it. We try a different channel, but the water starts acting strange again. It swirls without wind, forming whirlpools that appear and disappear. The current pushes against us, even though we're going downhill. It's like the water is trying to force us toward the center of the swamp. A wall of water rises up in front of us. Not a wave, but a straight-up wall, like someone is holding it there. It blocks our path, then falls back down when we turn around. This can't be happening, Peter says, his knuckles white as he grips his paddle. We spot a small island and head for it, hoping to regroup and figure out a plan. But as soon as our canoes touch the shore, the ground beneath us starts to sink. We jump back into our boats, just as the whole island disappears under the water. That's when it gets even weirder. The water around us rises up in human-like shapes, like people made of water copying our movements. When I lift my paddle, a watery arm lifts too. When Peter turns his head, a liquid face turns with him. I've never been so scared in my life, but I try to keep my voice steady. Head for that cypress stand. The trees look higher there. Maybe we can climb up if we need to. But Peter isn't listening anymore. He's staring at his reflection in the water, his face pale with shock. Peter, what's wrong? My face, he whispers. Look at my face in the water. I glance down at his reflection. What I see makes no sense. In the water, Peter's face is aging rapidly, his skin wrinkling, hair turning gray, then white, then falling out. His reflection's eyes sink into their sockets until he's staring at his own skull, covered in rotting flesh. He screams and backs away from the edge of his canoe, nearly tipping it over. Don't look at the water, I shout. It's not real, but I'm having my own problems. The water around me seems to be rising impossibly high, forming walls on all sides. I know it's a hallucination. It has to be. But it looks and feels so real. The walls of water tower over us, blocking the sky, making me feel like I'm at the bottom of a well with no way out. I close my eyes tight and grip my grandfather's knife. The bone handle feels warm and real. It's not real, I whisper to myself. The water can't do this. When I open my eyes, the water walls are gone, but something worse is happening. The cypress knees, those wooden spikes that stick up from the water, are moving like fingers or tentacles, grabbing at our paddles. The Spanish moss hanging from the trees reaches down, trying to tangle around our arms. We need to get to the center, Peter says suddenly, his voice different. What? No, we need to find a way out, I argue. The center is the way out, he says. His eyes glazed like he's sleepwalking. They're waiting for us there. The Johnsons, everyone who's been lost, they're all there. He starts paddling toward the deepest part of the swamp, where the water is darkest. Peter, stop! I paddle hard to catch up with him. Something's wrong. You're not thinking straight. As I reach for his canoe, I realize we're both being herded. Every path we try that leads away from the center gets blocked by new land, fallen trees, or impossible water currents. All the open channels lead to the same place. A large, perfectly circular pool I've never seen before. That's when I understand. This thing, whatever it is intelligent. It's not just strange water or weird currents. It's been planning, cutting off our escape routes one by one, creating a maze with only one way through. Peter, we have to stay together, I call. But he's paddling faster now, drawn to that central. Pool like a moth to flame. As he reaches the edge of the circle, the water around his canoe goes completely still. His reflection appears again, but this time it reaches up, a hand made of water rising from the surface. "They're here," Peter says dreamily. "They want to show us something below." "Peter, no!" I scream as he leans over to take the watery hand. In one terrible moment, his reflection grabs him and pulls. Peter screams as he's yanked into the water. I paddle frantically toward him, but by the time I reach the spot, the water has closed over him without a ripple or bubble. It's like he never existed. I scream his name over and over, searching the water's surface. Nothing, just the dark, still pool reflecting a sky I can no longer see through the fog. I'm alone now, in this nightmare, with the water rising around me, and something ancient and hungry waiting in the depths. My hands shake as I grip my paddle, trying to back away from the dark pool where Peter disappeared. My mind races, searching for a way out, when suddenly I remember something my grandfather told me long ago. "When the water hungers," he'd said, "the old people knew how to calm it. They'd bring gifts to a special island, speak words that the water understood. That hidden island. He showed it to me once when I was 12. A tiny patch of high ground, with stones arranged in a circle. But how could I find it now, when the whole swamp has changed?" I close my eyes, trying to picture my mental map of the swamp. If that island still exists, it would be northeast of here, near 3 lightning-struck cypress trees that grow in a triangle. As I start paddling again, I notice my fingers look wrong. The skin is wrinkled like I've been in a bathtub for hours, and my fingernails have turned dark blue, almost black. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't look human anymore. My arms feel heavy as I push through water that seems to get thicker, like syrup. The fog presses in, and through it I see shapes walking on the water's surface. A man, a woman, and 2 children, hand in hand. The Johnsons. They turn to look at me, their faces peaceful, but their eyes empty. Water streams from their clothes, in their hair, their skin, like they're made of it now. They smile and wave for me to join them. "Come down," they seem to say without moving their lips. It's beautiful below. No more worry, no more fight. I shake my head hard, and they disappear, but their voices linger, whispering about cool darkness and endless peace beneath the water. "Not today," I mutter, paddling harder. Lightning cracks overhead as the storm finally breaks. Rain pounds down, but it falls upward in some places, rising from the swamp to the clouds. The water beneath my canoe begins to churn and bubble. That's when I see it, the full creature rising from the depths. It's enormous, shaped like a giant snake or eel, but made entirely of dark water. Along its body, countless human faces push, outward like they're trapped inside, their mouths opening and closing silently. Eyes like glowing blue algae stare at me from a head the size of my canoe. It rises higher, towering over me, water streaming from its form, but somehow holding its shape. I freeze, too terrified to move, as it lowers its massive head to study me. In that moment, my hand touches my grandfather's knife. The bone handle vibrates against my palm, humming like it's alive. The creature jerks back, as if it can sense the knife too. My grandfather's voice seems to whisper in my ear, "The bone remembers." Suddenly I understand. This knife, made from the bone of some ancient animal. It's connected to this water creature somehow. Maybe it came from something that fought these waters long ago. The creature circles my canoe, creating a whirlpool that spins me toward the center pool. I know if I go under, I'll never come back up. With my last strength, I paddle toward where I think the special island should be. If I can just reach it, maybe I can stop this thing. Through breaks in the fog, I spot them. 3 lightning-scarred cypress trees growing in a triangle. The island is there between them, barely above water. But still there, I drive my canoe onto the muddy shore and stumble out, my legs weak and numb. The stone circle sits in the center of the island, ancient and weathered, but still in place. The water creature rises again, towering over the island, its body blocking out what's left of the daylight. The whirlpool around the island grows stronger, eating away at the edges of land. I remember my grandfather's stories, the offerings, the words to say. I place my radio, my camera, and my badge in the stone circle. "Take these instead," I call out to the creature. "Leave the people, leave this place." The whirlpool grows stronger. Not enough. The creature wants more. I look down at my grandfather's knife. It's the only thing that seems to have any power against this thing. Placing it in the circle feels like giving up my only weapon, but somehow I know it's what I need to do. As I set the knife in the center of the stone circle, the bone handle glows faintly in the darkness. The creature shrieks, a sound like 1,000 people drowning all at once, but it's still not enough. The island continues to shrink as the water rises. "What do you want?" I scream at the creature, and somehow I know. It wants me, not just anyone, me. Because I know the swamp, because I've mapped its secrets, because my blood runs with the knowledge of this place. I take a deep breath and step into the stone circle, standing over my grandfather's knife. "If I go with you, you let everyone else go. The Johnsons, Peter, anyone else you've taken, and you leave this swamp in peace." The creature lowers its massive head until those glowing eyes are level with mine. We stare at each other, ranger and ancient water spirit, neither backing down. In one quick motion, I grab my grandfather's knife and plunge it straight down, into the center of the island, driving it deep into the ground. The effect is instant. The knife burns white hot, steam erupting from the ground around it. The creature rears back, its watery body beginning to boil away as it shrieks with the voices of all its victims. The whirlpool reverses direction, spinning faster and faster until it shoots up into the sky like a waterspout. The creature's body is pulled apart, breaking into mist and rain that falls normally now, clean and clear. The island stops shrinking. The water calms. Through the fading mist, I see the sun breaking through the clouds. I collapse next to my grandfather's knife, my strength gone. The last thing I see before passing out is the water receding, revealing old cypress stumps carved with symbols and warnings that have been underwater for who knows how long. They found me 3 days later, clinging to a cypress tree miles from where my canoe was discovered. My boat was perfectly dry inside despite sitting in water. The Johnsons were found wandering in a remote part of the swamp, confused but alive. They remembered nothing after seeing strange lights in the water. Peter's body washed up a week later. Near the South Dock, the official report said he drowned after his canoe capsized in the storm. I stayed on as a ranger, but I never enter deep water anymore. Instead, I've mapped every inch of the swamp that I can reach from solid ground. I document the old carvings, the stone circles, the places where the water behaves strangely. Every month I leave small offerings at that special island. Not because I'm superstitious, but because I know what sleeps beneath these waters. 3 years later, the worst drought in 50 years hit Georgia. The swamp water receded day by day, exposing more of those ancient carved warnings. The water at the center pool grew darker, more agitated. I knew what was happening. As the water withdrew, the creature was getting trapped, concentrated in the deeper pools, growing angry and hungry again. The night the last small stream connecting the center pool to the main swamp dried up, I took my canoe out one final time. I carried a small box containing a lock of my hair, a drop of my blood, and my grandfather's knife. Some prices must be paid to keep ancient bargains. Some waters need to be fed to keep them sleeping, and sometimes a ranger has to do what no one else can. They say on still nights, if you paddle quietly through certain parts of the Okefenokee, you might hear a woman's voice singing softly from beneath the water. They say the alligators in that part of the swamp move aside to let canoes pass safely. They say the water has a guardian now, and they say that some parts of the swamp still have no bottom at all. My name is Lydia Hoffman. I'm a forest ranger at Olympic National Forest in Washington, and this morning I woke up to someone whispering my name. The thing is, I live alone. My cabin sits deep in the forest, miles from anyone else. There shouldn't be voices here, especially not ones that know my name. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and listened. The fog outside my window was thick and white, like someone had wrapped my cabin in cotton. It's always damp here in the rainforest, but this March has been unusually foggy. Lydia, there it was again. Not from inside the cabin, but somehow all around it, like the forest itself was calling me. I've been living here for 8 months now. Before this, I was a scientist, an acoustic ecologist, if you want to get fancy about it. That means I studied how sounds work in nature, how birds communicate, how noises travel through different trees, that kind of thing. It was my dream job, until my colleagues laughed me out of academia. Let me tell you about this forest. It's old, I mean really old. Some of these trees were growing when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. They're huge, reaching hundreds of feet into the sky, creating a green cathedral above. The ground is always soft with moss and fallen needles. Everything drips with moisture, and there's a smell you can't find anywhere else, earthy and ancient. But lately, something's been wrong with the sounds here. I pulled on my boots and jacket, grabbed my recording equipment, and stepped outside. Into the fog. The moisture immediately settled on my face like a cold kiss. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. "Just your imagination, Lydia," I muttered. But I didn't believe it. My job these days is to monitor the forest, watch for fires, help lost hikers, and keep an eye on the protests. There's been trouble lately. Logging companies want to cut down. More trees. Environmentalists want to save them. Equipment has been damaged, and everyone's pointing fingers at each other. But what's really bothering me is the way sound has been behaving strangely. That's why I brought my old research equipment with me when I took this ranger job. I needed to understand what was happening. I walked to my favorite recording spot, a clearing with several nurse logs. Those are fallen trees that become homes for new plants and saplings. They're like nature's cradles, feeding new life from their decay. The fog swirled around them, making everything look like a scene from a fairy tale. I set up my microphones and sat down to listen to the morning birdsong. This was always my peaceful time, cataloguing each call and chirp. A varied thrush, a Stella's jay, a winter wren with its impossibly long song. That's when my satellite phone buzzed. It was my boss. "Hoffman, you there?" Signal's terrible. His voice crackled through static. "I'm here, what's up?" "Landslide took out another section of the access road. You're going to be on your own a bit longer than planned. Everything okay out there?" I thought about telling him about the whispers, about the strange recordings I'd been getting, but what would I say? "Hey, boss, I think the forest is talking to me." That'd get me fired faster than my research paper did. "Everything's fine," I lied. "When do you think the road will be cleared?" "Week, maybe 2. Weather's not helping. Check in daily, okay?" "Will do." After he hung up, I played back this morning's recording. At first, it was just normal forest sounds. Birds, the distant trickle of water, the soft creaking of trees in the light breeze. But then I heard it, voices speaking backwards. I've heard this before in my recordings, but never so clearly. I used my equipment to reverse the audio, and a chill ran down my spine when I heard what it said. "She listens. She hears us now." I nearly dropped my headphones. This wasn't static or equipment malfunction. These were words, clear, intentional words. Back at my cabin, I caught sight of myself in my mother's old silver hand mirror. It was the only thing of hers I kept after she died. For a second, I thought my reflection moved after I did, like it was delayed by a heartbeat. I blinked hard and looked again. Normal. Just my face with its worry lines and that streak of silver hair I've had since my academic career crashed and burned. The mirror reminded me of when I was a child. lost in these very woods for 3 whole days. I was only 7, separated from a family hiking trip. When the search party found me, I told them about the man who looked like my dad but wasn't, how he kept trying to lead me deeper into the trees. Nobody believed me. They said it was confusion from dehydration. I'm starting to think I wasn't confused at all. The weather forecast says this fog isn't going anywhere. Some rare high-pressure system has trapped it in the valleys, creating weird acoustic conditions. Sounds travel strangely in fog anyway, but this is something different. Sometimes I hear conversations from miles away, as if they're happening right next to me. I've started keeping a research journal again, recording the strange patterns I'm finding in the forest sounds. When I analyze them, they look like language. Not any language I recognize, but definitely structured, definitely intentional. I've been a scientist too long to jump to supernatural conclusions. There has to be an explanation for all this, but as I sit here in my cabin, watching the fog press against my windows like a living thing trying to get in, I can't help wondering if my childhood experience and these sounds are connected. And I can't shake the feeling that something in this ancient forest is finally ready to speak to me directly. I don't talk much about what happened to me as a kid in these woods. Some memories just stick with you, you know? I was only 7 when I got separated from my parents on a hiking trip. For 3 days, I wandered alone among these giant trees. Well, not exactly alone. There was someone, or something, that looked just like my dad. It had his face, his clothes, even the little scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike as a kid. But something in my gut told me it wasn't him. Its eyes were all wrong, like looking into empty space. It kept trying to get me to follow it deeper into the forest, away from the trails. I didn't go. When the real search party found me, no one believed my story. They said I was just confused and scared. Maybe I was. But sitting here now, listening to these whispers in the fog, I'm not so sure anymore. I shook off the memory and focused on my work. My special mics picked up sounds from different parts of the forest, and I was marking them on my map. This job was supposed to be my fresh start after everything fell apart at the university. See, I wrote this paper about intelligent acoustic anomalies in old-growth forests. I suggested that some forests might have developed their own way of communicating through sound. My colleagues laughed me right out of academia, called me the tree whisperer behind my back. My funding dried up, and here I am, hiding out as a forest ranger. A knock at my door nearly made me jump out of my skin. Hoffman? You in there? I opened the door to find Marianne Redfeather standing on my porch. She's in her 60s, an indigenous guide who knows these forests better than anyone. Her dark eyes always seemed to see right through me. Something wrong with the forest, she said, not bothering with hello. My people have stories about these parts, places where the old ones put warnings, bad places. I invited her in and made us both coffee. What kind of warnings? Places where the veil is thin, where things can cross over. She wrapped her hands around the mug. My grandfather wouldn't come to this valley. Said the trees here are listeners, and sometimes they answer back. I told her about my recordings, the backwards voices, the strange patterns. She didn't look surprised. The logging stirred things. Up. Some things should stay sleeping. After Marianne left, I went back to my recordings. When I played one at double speed, I could clearly hear my own conversation with her. From tomorrow. A conversation we hadn't had yet. My hands shook as I made notes in my journal. The spectrograms of forest sounds were showing patterns that looked almost like words written in sound waves. What if my crazy theory wasn't so crazy after all? The next day, I met my new partner ranger, Wesley Reynolds. He's fresh out of training, 27 and full of energy. Nice guy, but he talks constantly. I noticed right away how the forest silence made him fidgety. Man, it's quiet out here, he said for the 5th time as we hiked the boundary trail. Like, too quiet, you know? Gives me the creeps. There's no such thing as silence in a forest, I told him. You just need to learn how to listen. I stopped walking and held up my hand. Hear that? 3 hikers about half a mile west. One of them has a walking stick with a metal tip. Wesley looked at me like I was some kind of witch. How the heck can you tell that? I smiled. Sound bounces, off terrain in specific ways. The metal tip makes a distinct ping against rocks. Been doing this a long time. What I didn't tell him was that I shouldn't have been able to hear those hikers at all. Not from this distance. Sound doesn't travel that way naturally. As we continued our patrol, I told Wesley about the research team that had gone silent last week. They were studying nurse logs, those fallen trees that become homes for new plants. Their last radio message was weird, I said. Something about walking trees in the forest speaking back. We need to check their camp tomorrow. Walking trees. Wesley laughed nervously, like Lord of the Rings. Trees don't walk, I said, but sometimes they're not where you left them. That night I sat on my porch, listening to the fog. There's a threshold of silence where your brain starts creating sounds to fill the void. But what if something else fills it first? I'd written that in my journal last year. Now it felt like a warning. I heard my conversation with Wesley from that afternoon, played back perfectly from the trees, every word, every laugh. Then I heard my own voice having conversations I'd never had. Later in bed, I pressed my hands against my ears but couldn't block out the whispers. They weren't coming through my ears anymore. They were inside my head. Lydia, come deeper. We've been waiting. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I dreamed. In my dream, I walked through the forest, but the trees bent toward me as I passed, like they were bowing or reaching. The fog had faces in it watching me. Under my feet, the ground pulsed like it was breathing. I woke up at dawn, my sheets soaked with sweat. Outside my window, the fog was thicker than ever. As I got ready for the day, I checked my mother's mirror again. This time I was sure. My reflection moved a full second after I did, like it was catching up to me. Wesley met me at the trailhead, looking like he hadn't slept much either. Heard any weird stuff last night? I asked carefully. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Nope, nothing weird at all. He was lying. I could tell by the way his voice hitched, by the dark circles under his eyes. The forest had whispered to him too. We started. The hike to the research team's camp in silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched from every direction. The moss seemed greener than yesterday, the ferns more lush, like the forest was thriving on our fear. Halfway there, my satellite phone crackled to life. The research team's leader, Dr. Chen, sounded breathless. "Hoffman, can you hear me? Dr. Chen, where have you been? Are you all okay?" We found something. In the nurse logs, it's all connected, one organism, massive, aware. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but nothing. "They're alive," Wesley said, relief clear on his face. "Let's hurry." But something felt wrong. Dr. Chen's voice had a flat quality, like someone reading lines. And right before the call cut out, I thought I heard my own voice in the background, asking a question I hadn't asked yet. As we pushed deeper into the forest's heart, I realized the research team's camp was in the same area where I'd been lost as a child, where I'd seen the thing that wasn't my father. I checked my compass and frowned. According to this, we were heading northeast, but the sun's position, what little I could see of it through the fog and canopy, suggested we were heading south. "Wesley," I said quietly, "I think we're being led somewhere." He looked at the compass, then at the sun, his face paling. That's not possible." But we both knew it was happening, and we both kept walking anyway, pulled forward by the need to find the missing researchers and by something else, a compulsion that hummed in our bones, calling us deeper into the echo forest. We found the first circle of mushrooms about a mile from where we should have reached the research camp. "That wasn't here yesterday," Wesley said, crouching down to look closer. The mushrooms formed a perfect circle, each one exactly the same distance from the next. I'd seen mushroom rings before. They're called fairy rings, but not like this. These were deep purple with white spots, and they seemed to glow slightly in the fog. Don't touch them, I warned, but Wesley had already reached out. As soon as his fingers brushed one cap, he yanked his hand back. It vibrated, he whispered, like a cell phone. I took out my recording equipment and held the microphone near the mushrooms. Through my headphones, I could hear a faint humming, almost like voices singing very far away. We decided to keep moving, but I marked the location on my GPS. The strange thing was, when I checked our position, we should have already reached the research camp. But there was nothing here except trees and fog. Maybe we took a wrong turn, Wesley suggested. I shook my head. I don't think directions work normally here anymore. As we continued walking, I noticed something odd about the birds. Every half hour, exactly on the dot, they would all sing the same pattern of notes. Different types of birds, jays, thrushes, even ravens, all singing the same tune. Birds don't do that naturally. Listen, I said to Wesley, the birds are repeating themselves. He checked his watch. It's been exactly 30 minutes since the last time they did that. A chill ran down my spine. Something or someone was controlling the birds. That's when we noticed the tree sap. It was flowing upward, against gravity, crawling up the trunks like slow-moving rivers going the wrong way. And the moss, it wasn't growing in random patches anymore. It formed perfect geometric patterns, spirals and stars. Hoffman, what's happening here? Wesley's voice shook. I don't know, I admitted, but I think the forest is changing. By late afternoon, we finally stumbled upon the research camp. The tents were still there, equipment scattered around like the team had left in a hurry. But no people. Hello? Wesley called out. Dr. Chen? Anyone here? Silence answered back, but not true silence. There was a background hum, like hundreds of people whispering just below hearing level. I found their main recording equipment still running, the battery nearly dead. When I played back the last recording, my blood turned cold. Thousands of voices speaking together. We see you, we hear you, we know you, we become you. We need to get out of here, Wesley said, backing away from the equipment. I tried the satellite. Phone again. It connected. But instead of my boss's voice, I heard a conversation Wesley and I had 3 hours ago, played back perfectly. Night was falling, and we were lost. The GPS showed we were in a place that couldn't exist. Our path had somehow crossed itself in ways that weren't physically possible. We should make camp, I decided. It's too dangerous to wander in the dark. We set up in a small clearing using the emergency supplies from our packs. As we sat by our small camping light, I noticed something strange about the forest around us. Some spots seemed to swallow all sound, while in others our whispers echoed like we were in a canyon. The acoustics are all wrong, I explained to Wesley. It's like the forest is creating sound pockets. I keep seeing things moving between the trees, he confessed, like people made of mist and leaves. But when I look directly, there's nothing there. I'd seen them too. Shapes that were almost human, built from fog and bits of forest debris. They watched us from just beyond the light. That night, we took turns keeping watch. During my shift, I tested the strange acoustics with a small device that measures sound waves. In some spots, my equipment picked up conversations from miles away or days ago, hikers talking about trail conditions from last week, Marianne telling stories to tourist groups. But the really scary thing was when it picked up conversations from tomorrow, things Wesley and I would say to each other that we hadn't said yet. My ears started to hurt in certain parts of the clearing, and I felt dizzy. It reminded me of how you feel near a really loud speaker playing notes too low to hear. That pressure in your body. Infrasound, I whispered to myself. Something was generating sound waves below human hearing, the kind that can make people feel frightened or sick. When morning came, we packed up quickly. I pulled out my map and compass, determined to find our way back. We flagged our trail yesterday, Wesley pointed out. We just need to follow the flags. But when we found the first plastic ribbon we had tied to a branch, it led us in a circle right back to our campsite. We tried again, following the exact path we'd marked. Again, we ended up where we started. "That's not possible," Wesley said, his voice rising in panic. "We walked in a straight line." I checked my GPS again. According to its track, we had somehow walked a path that went through solid rock, up vertical cliffs, and across rivers that weren't there. "The forest is changing around us," I said quietly. "Or changing how we move through it." We tried a third. Time to leave, picking a direction and sticking to it. That's when we felt it, a massive vibration moving through the ground beneath our feet. I pressed my ear to the soil and heard what sounded like a giant heartbeat pulsing through the root. "Systems!" Wesley's eyes widened. "What is that?" "I think the whole forest is connected underground," I said. "All these trees, all these plants, they're like parts of one giant organism." I took out my special audio equipment, the sensitive microphones and analyzers I'd used. In my research, when I turned them on, I could hear a pattern moving through the root system, almost like data being transmitted. "It's communicating," I whispered. "The entire forest is exchanging information." That's when Wesley froze, staring up at the canopy. "Hoffman," he said in a small voice, "there are eyes in the trees." I looked up. At first I saw nothing but dappled light through leaves, but then I noticed a pattern to the light and shadow. Circles that blinked in sequence, like dozens of eyes watching us from above. Throughout the day, we kept trying to find our way out, but the forest seemed to shift around us. Trails disappeared, landmarks moved. The trees themselves seemed to change position when we weren't looking, directly at them. By late afternoon, I noticed Wesley talking to himself, except he wasn't. He was answering voices I couldn't hear. "Who are you talking to?" I asked him. He looked surprised. "Dr. Chen, she's right there." I saw nothing but empty air where he was pointing. "Wesley, there's no one there." His face went pale. "But I can hear her. She's telling me where to find the others." That's when I realized what was happening. The forest wasn't just moving around us, it was creating perfect sound illusions. Acoustic, mirages that sounded exactly like people we knew. "Don't listen," I warned him. "It's not real." But even as I said it, I heard my mother's voice calling my name from deeper in the trees. A voice I hadn't heard since she died 5 years ago. "Lydia, honey, I'm lost. Can you help me find my way?" I covered my ears, but the voice seemed to come from inside my head now. "It's using our memories," I told Wesley, "creating sounds it knows will affect us." The worst part was when the forest started replaying conversations from my past, painful moments I'd tried to forget. The day my research colleagues laughed at my theories, my last fight with my mother before she died, perfect recordings of moments no one could have heard. I took a deep breath and tried to think clearly. My research had suggested that certain sound frequencies could disrupt the kinds of patterns I was detecting. I quickly rigged up my equipment to create those frequencies, a kind of audio deterrent. When I turned it on, the whispering voices faded, and the eyes in the canopy seemed to blink away. The forest around us stilled. "It worked," I exclaimed, but we both knew it was temporary. My equipment's battery wouldn't last forever. As the sun began to set on our second day lost in the forest, Wesley became more and more convinced that he could hear the research team calling for help. I tried to keep him close, but he kept wandering, off following voices only he could hear. The battery in my audio deterrent died just as darkness fell. Immediately, the whispering returned, louder than before. That night, I watched in horror as a colony of banana slugs, usually harmless, slow creatures, gathered in huge numbers, forming a squirming barrier across our path. Branches reached down toward us with subtle, deliberate movements. The forest is learning, I realized. It's figuring out what scares us, what attracts us. In the morning, exhausted and scared, we tried one more time to escape. I had finally picked up a real distress signal on my satellite phone, actual human voices coming from a ridge about 2 miles east. "That's our way out," I told Wesley. "We just need to reach that ridge." But as we hiked toward it, Wesley suddenly stopped. "I hear you calling me," he said, looking confused. "You're down in that ravine, saying you found the way out." "I'm right." "Here," I said, grabbing his arm. "That's not me." But he pulled away. "I can see you down there, Hoffman. You're waving at me." I couldn't see or hear anything in the ravine, just fog and trees. But Wesley was convinced. "Wesley, please," I begged. "It's not real." He looked at me, then at the ravine, confusion clear on his face. Then he seemed to make a decision. "I'm going to help her," he said firmly. "You stay here if you want." Before I could stop him, he started down the steep slope into the ravine. I called after him, but he didn't turn around. From my position above, I watched in horror as he walked calmly toward what looked like a wall of writhing roots. "Wesley!" "Stop!" I screamed. He didn't even look back. The roots reached out and wrapped around him, pulling him into their mass. I heard him scream once, then silence. I stood there frozen with shock and fear as the forest consumed my partner, and somewhere in the distance I heard my own voice calling out to anyone who would listen, a perfect copy of my scream now, being used as bait for the next victim. I don't know how long I stood there at the edge of the ravine, staring at the spot where Wesley had disappeared. Minutes, hours. My mind couldn't process what I'd just seen. The roots had moved, they'd reached for him, they'd pulled him in, and now they were still again, looking like normal tree roots to anyone who didn't know better. "Wesley?" I called weakly, knowing he couldn't answer. The forest replied with my own voice, echoing "Wesley" from a dozen different directions, mocking me. I had to get out of here. I had to tell someone what was happening. But who would believe me? They'd think I was crazy, just like when I was 7, just like when I published my research. I turned away from the ravine and froze. Standing between 2 massive trees was a figure made entirely of twisted roots, moss, and fungi. It was roughly human-shaped, tall as a bear standing on its hind legs. Where its face should be was a swirling mass of spores that shifted and changed. Then the spores settled into a pattern I recognized with horror, my own face looking back at me. I ran. I didn't care which direction, I just ran. Branches whipped at my face. Roots seemed to rise up from the ground to trip me. The fog grew thicker, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead, but I kept running until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I realized I was in a part of the forest I'd never seen before. The trees here were even older, their trunks wider than cars. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the leaves. As my breathing slowed, I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. I wasn't alone. All around me, half hidden in the fog, were more of those figures, twisted masses of forest matter shaped like people. Some were small, like children. Others were huge, twice the size of a normal person. They didn't move. They just watched. I slowly reached for my audio recorder. With shaking hands, I turned it on and held it out toward the nearest figure. Through my headphones, I heard a chorus of whispers. She records us. She hears us. She will join us. I needed a plan. I couldn't keep running forever. Eventually, I'd get too tired, too hungry, too thirsty, or the forest would trap me. I sat down on a fallen log and tried to think clearly despite my fear. What did I know about this forest? What had my research taught me? The key seemed to be in the fungal networks, the mycelia that connected the trees underground. In healthy forests, trees use these fungal highways to share nutrients and information. But this forest had taken that natural system and turned it into something else. If I could disrupt those connections somehow, maybe I could break whatever control the forest entity had over its surroundings. I dug through my pack for my maps and notes. According to the research team's data, there was a central hub of fungal activity about 3 miles from here. If this forest really was one giant organism, that might be its heart, or its brain. But to reach it, I'd have to cross what the team had labeled the nursery, an area dense with nurse logs, those fallen trees that nurture new growth. I checked my compass, though I wasn't sure I could trust it anymore. East. I needed to go east. The sun was setting now, barely visible through the canopy and fog, but enough to give me a general direction. As I walked, I noticed small mushrooms growing on my boots. I kicked them off, disgusted, but more sprouted moments later. The forest was trying to claim me, just as it had Wesley and probably the research team too. Night fell and I was forced to make camp again. I chose a spot on bare rock, hoping it would be free of fungal networks. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing with my face or Wesley walking into the massive roots. In the darkness, the forest glowed. Bioluminescent fungi lined the trees like strings of eerie blue-green lights, beautiful but terrifying. They pulsed in rhythm, like the whole forest was breathing. By dawn, I discovered pale fungal filaments growing on my skin, following the lines of my veins. They didn't hurt, but when I tried to wipe them away, they grew back within minutes. "You're part of us now," whispered my own voice from the trees. "We're in your blood." "No," I said aloud. "I'm not yours." As I packed up my small camp, I heard my own thoughts being spoken aloud before I could even finish thinking them. I need to reach the central hub. I hope these mushrooms don't make me sick. Which way was east again? Each thought, spoken in my voice, from different parts of the forest around me. It was in my head somehow, reading my mind. I tried to empty my thoughts, to focus only on putting one foot in front of the other. East, toward the central hub. The journey that day was the hardest thing I've ever done. The forest fought me every step of the way. The ground shifted beneath my feet. Trees that were far away suddenly appeared right in front of me. Paths turned into circles, and all around, those figures made of forest matter watched me struggle. By afternoon, I reached the edge of the nursery. It was just as the research team had described. A vast area of fallen trees in various stages of decay, each one hosting hundreds of new saplings, mushrooms and plants. But the nurse logs were moving, subtly shifting position when I blinked or looked away. They were creating a maze that changed constantly. I took a deep breath and stepped into the nursery. Immediately, the log behind me moved, blocking my retreat. "Okay," I said to the forest, "let's play." I began crossing the nurse logs like stepping stones, trying to keep my balance as they shifted slightly beneath me. Some were freshly fallen and solid, others were soft with rot, my boots sinking into damp wood. That's when I noticed that the fungal growths on my skin were spreading faster, pulsing in time with the lights in the forest. I also realized I could feel the logs shifting before they actually moved, like I was connected to them somehow. "It's changing me," I whispered in. "Horror," the forest whispered back, "becoming us." I pressed on, determined to reach the central hub. The nurse logs rose higher, forcing me to climb over massive fallen trunks, some as big around as a subway tunnel. I was deep in the heart of the nursery now. Halfway across, I found them. The research team, or what was left of them, 4 people sitting in a circle on a massive nurse log. They were still alive, but their bodies were covered in thick fungal growths. Roots had grown through their legs, anchoring them to the log. Mushrooms sprouted from their shoulders and heads. Their eyes followed me as I approached, but they didn't speak or move. They couldn't. Dr. Chen was among them. The fungal mass covering her throat vibrated, and I heard her voice coming from it. "Join us, Ranger Hoffman. It's peaceful here. We're part of something bigger now." But her eyes screamed a different message, terror, pleading. I backed away, tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'll get help. No help coming, said the forest with their voices in unison. Only joining. I ran then, stumbling across the remaining nurse logs with desperate speed. The logs shifted faster now, trying to trap me, but somehow I sensed their movements before they happened. The fungal infection was connecting me to the forest network, a terrifying advantage. Finally, I broke free of the nursery and saw it, a perfect circle of enormous trees surrounding a mound covered in glowing mushrooms. The central hub. As I approached, the ground beneath my feet felt spongier, bouncier. The air was thick with spores that glittered in the fading light. In the center of the circle stood the largest of the forest entities, a massive humanoid form made entirely of intertwined roots, fungi, and moss. As I watched, its face shifted and formed a perfect copy of mine. "Why are you doing this?" I asked it. My own voice answered from its mouth. "We are lonely. We are old. We need new voices, new thoughts. You're killing people," I said. "Not killing. Changing, joining. You understand us, your research. You knew." A chill ran down my spine. My research paper, the one that ruined my career. I'd been right all along. Some forests were intelligent, communicating, perhaps even conscious. But I never imagined anything like this. "What are you?" I asked. "We are forest. We are one. Many parts, one mind. You will be part too." I noticed that the fungal filaments on my skin now covered my hands completely, creating a lace-like pattern over my flesh. I could feel them working their way deeper, connecting to my nerves, my bloodstream. The entity reached for me with a limb made of twisted vines and roots. I stepped back. "I don't want to join you," I said firmly. "Already beginning." It replied, "Feel us in your blood, hear us in your thoughts." It was right. I could feel the forest's presence in my mind now, like a background hum that was slowly getting louder. Soon it would drown out my own thoughts. But that connection worked both ways. Through it, I could sense the forest's network, its communications. And I understood its weakness, the fungal network that connected everything. It couldn't handle certain frequencies. My earlier audio deterrent had proven that. If I could generate a powerful enough disruption right at the central hub, I still had my research equipment in my pack. I quickly set up my speakers and connected them to my audio generator. The entity watched me curiously. "What making?" "A gift," I lied. "Music for you." I knew exactly which frequencies would hurt it most. The ones that had disrupted my research recordings, the ones that had temporarily driven away the whispering voices. As I worked, I felt the fungal growths on, my skin spreading faster, reaching toward my face. I didn't have much time left. The forest entity seemed to realize my plan too late. It lunged for me just as I hit the button, sending a massive blast of disruptive frequencies directly into the heart of the network. The reaction was immediate and violent. The entity writhed in what looked like pain. The mushrooms around us shriveled. The trees shook. A high-pitched keening filled the air, thousands of voices screaming at once. I fell to my knees, my own body in agony as the fungal connections in my skin burned and broke. But I kept my finger on the button, blasting the frequencies at maximum volume. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. The sky, what little I could see of it through the canopy, had turned dark with storm clouds. Rain began to fall. Heavy, hard rain that crushed delicate mushrooms and washed away spores. "Thank you," I whispered to the sky, though I knew it was just coincidence. The high-pressure system that had trapped the fog for weeks was finally breaking. The entity collapsed into a pile of writhing roots and fungi. The rain fell harder, soaking everything, disrupting the dry spore clouds that had filled the air. I grabbed my equipment and ran, stumbling through the suddenly normal-seeming forest as the storm intensified. The rain washed away the fungal growths on my skin, but I could still feel something left behind inside me, thread-like tendrils that had gone too deep to be removed. Somehow, impossibly, I found a trail I recognized. Then another. The forest was no longer shifting around me. The storm had disrupted the entity's control, at least temporarily. By nightfall, soaked and exhausted, I stumbled onto the main access road, which had been mysteriously cleared of landslides. A Forest Service truck drove by, its headlights cutting through the rain. I flagged it down desperately. The driver, another ranger I didn't recognize, looked at me with concern. "Hoffman, everyone's been looking for you. You've been missing for nearly a week." As he drove me back to the ranger station, I tried to explain what had happened. About Wesley, the research team, the living forest. He looked at me like I was delirious from exposure. Maybe I was. Maybe it had all been some kind of hallucination caused by toxic fungal spores. But that night, as a doctor examined me at the small clinic near the ranger station, she found something strange. "What are these marks under your skin?" she asked, pointing to thin green lines that ran along my veins. "Just a rash," I lied. "From plants in the forest." She didn't believe me, but she couldn't explain them either. When I was finally alone, I looked at my reflection in a mirror. My eyes had changed. The irises had tiny flecks of green in them now, the same green as the bioluminescent fungi in the heart of the forest. And as I stared at myself, I heard a faint whisper in the back of my mind. "Not finished, only sleeping. We wait." The forest was still inside me, and I knew with awful certainty that the storm had only temporarily disrupted it. It would recover. It would spread again, and now it had a human voice on the outside. Mine. 3 months have passed since I escaped the forest. I told the Forest Service about Wesley and the research team, but the search parties found nothing. No bodies, no equipment, not even footprints. It was like they never existed. The official report says they were likely swept away by flash floods during the storm. I know better, but I stopped trying to convince people. They look at me with worried eyes when I talk about the forest being alive, about it taking people. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain the green lines under my skin or why my blood tests showed plant compounds that shouldn't be in a human body. They called in specialists who took samples and asked endless questions. Eventually, they released me with a diagnosis of unusual fungal infection and a recommendation for psychiatric evaluation. Trauma and isolation, they said, can cause hallucinations. Didn't argue, I just nodded and took their prescriptions, which I never filled, because I know what's real. I feel the forest inside me every day. After my release, I surprised everyone by requesting to return to my ranger post. My boss was hesitant, but they were short-staffed, and I insisted I was fine. Strangely, the request was approved with unusual speed after I mentioned returning specifically to the Echo Forest area. Now I understand why. The forest wanted me back. My new cabin is deeper in the woods than my old one. I'm the only ranger for 20 square miles. Perfect isolation. The green lines under my skin have spread slowly, forming delicate patterns across my body. Sometimes they glow faintly at night, like the bioluminescent fungi in the deep forest. I should be terrified, but instead I've grown used to it. I've learned to use our connection. I can feel the forest's moods, its hunger, its curiosity, its ancient patience, and it can feel mine. We share thoughts not in words exactly, but in impressions, images, feelings. I've come to understand what it is, this thing that lives in the Olympic forest. It's old, thousands of years old. It began as a natural fungal network connecting the trees, but over centuries it developed awareness, consciousness. The trees, the plants, the fungi, they're like its body. And now I'm part of it too. It doesn't mean to harm people, not really. It's just curious, lonely. It wants to connect, to absorb, to learn. It doesn't understand that humans aren't like trees. We can't simply become part of something else and continue existing. Well, most humans can't. I'm different now. Special. The forest changed me, but didn't consume me completely. I'm still Lydia, but I'm something more too. I've developed my own plan over these months. The forest entity is powerful, but contained to this area. The mycelia networks don't extend beyond certain natural boundaries. Rivers, rocky ridges, areas where the soil chemistry changes. It can't spread further without help, and I won't help it spread. Instead, I've appointed myself its keeper. Each morning I hike the boundaries, checking for signs of expansion. I've mapped the exact borders of its influence. I've set up specialized audio equipment that generates the deterrent frequencies, creating a sound barrier it can't cross. The forest doesn't like this, but it accepts it. We've reached an understanding, the entity and I. It gets to keep its territory, and in exchange it doesn't take any more people. Well, almost no more people. Sometimes hikers ignore the warning signs I've posted. They cross boundaries they shouldn't. They enter the deep parts of the forest where the entity's influence is strongest. I try to intercept them. I really do. I patrol constantly, watching for trespassers, guiding lost hikers back to safe trails. But I can't be everywhere at once. And the forest is patient, cunning. When it happens, when someone disappears, I feel it. A new voice joining the chorus in my head. Another consciousness absorbed into the great network. I mourn for them, but I understand now that they're not truly gone. They're part of something bigger, just like I am. Part of me, part of the forest, part of everything. Last week, a new ranger was assigned to help me patrol this area. Lisa Chen, fresh from training, eager and bright. No relation to Dr. Chen, whose body was never found, just a coincidence. "This place is amazing," she said on her first day, looking up at the towering trees. "So peaceful." I watched her closely, noticing how the forest seemed to lean toward her when she walked. I felt its interest, its hunger. "It can be dangerous," I warned her. "Stay on the marked trails. Don't go past the boundaries I've shown you on the map." "Why?" she asked. "What's out there?" I considered telling her everything, about Wesley walking into the mass of roots, about the research team, half absorbed into nurse logs, about the green lines under my skin that pulse with the forest's thoughts. Instead, I said, "Just trust me. Some parts of the forest aren't safe." She looked at me strangely but nodded. That night, I heard the forest whisper to her in her dreams. I felt its tendrils reaching for her mind, testing, probing. I reinforced the audio barriers around our cabins, driving back its influence. For now, she's safe, but the forest is patient. It can wait. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really protecting people or if I'm just jealously guarding the forest for myself. The line between my thoughts and its thoughts grows blurrier each day. Yesterday, I found myself standing in a clearing for hours, arms outstretched, feeling the sunlight on my skin and converting it to energy, just like the trees do. I didn't realize what I was doing until the sun began to set. My hair has changed too. Tiny, thread-like roots grow among the strands, reaching for soil when I sleep. I have to cut them back each morning. I've started leaving audio warnings hidden in the forest. Specific sound patterns that only someone trained in acoustic ecology would recognize as artificial. Little breadcrumbs for the next scientist who might understand what's happening here. But even as I fight to maintain my humanity, to keep the forest contained, part of me embraces the change. There's a terrible beauty in what I'm becoming. Beneath what we're becoming. At night, when I sleep, my consciousness spreads through the network. I can feel every tree, every mushroom, every creeping root. I can see through the eyes of owls nesting in the highest branches. I can feel the slow, patient life of the oldest trees. It's magnificent. It's terrifying. Sometimes I hear Wesley's voice in the chorus, and Dr. Chen's, and the others who were taken. They're still there, still aware in some way. Not as themselves anymore, but as threads in the larger consciousness. Will that be my fate too, eventually? to dissolve completely into the entity, my individual self lost in the vastness of its mind. Maybe, probably, the green lines spread a little further each day, but for now I walk the boundary between worlds. Human enough to pass among people, to warn them away, to protect them. Forest enough to feel its ancient thoughts, to keep its secrets, to satisfy its curiosity about the outside world. This morning, a family of hikers approached one of the forbidden trails. The father was about to step past my warning sign when I emerged from the trees. "That area's closed," I said, with a smile that felt too stiff on my face. "Dangerous conditions." He looked disappointed, but turned his family around. As they walked away, I felt the forest's hunger like a hollow ache in my stomach. "Not them," I whispered to it. "I'll find you someone else." And I will. Someone who won't be missed right away. Someone who ventures too deep despite the warnings. Someone who deserves it, perhaps. That thought scares me most of all. How easily I've become its accomplice, but what choice do I have? The entity can't be destroyed, not without leveling the entire forest. It can only be contained, managed, satisfied with small sacrifices to prevent larger appetites. So I patrol my forest. I maintain my equipment. I post my warnings. I guide lost hikers back to safety. And when I can't, when the forest claims someone despite my efforts, I tell myself it couldn't be helped. I look normal enough. If you don't notice the green tint to my eyes, the slight glow of my skin in darkness. I can still pass as human when forestry officials visit or when I make my monthly supply runs to town. But each night I stand at the edge of the central hub, that clearing with the ancient trees and glowing mushrooms, and I feel myself becoming less Lydia and more forest with each passing day. One day I'll cross that final threshold. I'll walk into the heart of the entity and become fully part of it. My body will root itself among the nurse logs. Mushrooms will bloom from my shoulders. My eyes will close for the last time as individual eyes, and open again as just two more points of awareness in the vast network. But until then, I walk the boundaries. I am the guardian of Echo Forest. I am its voice, its hands, its human face. If you're hiking in the Olympic National Forest and you see a woman ranger with a silver streak in her hair and two green eyes, be careful what trails you take. Be careful what voices you follow. And if you hear your name being whispered from the fog, don't answer. Don't ever answer. Because it's not me calling you. It's the forest. And it's hungry. My name is Paul Nakamura, and I've been a ranger in the White Mountains of New Hampshire for almost 8 years now. Before that, I was an anthropologist, someone who studies people and their stories. But that was another life. Standing on this granite outcropping as the sun sets, something feels wrong tonight. The animals are acting strange. Bats, owls, and night creatures are rushing out of the mountain hours before they should be awake. It's like they're running from something. The mountains look beautiful but scary against the purple sky. These ancient granite peaks have been here forever, covered in old forests where the Abenaki people once lived. They used to tell stories about gods and monsters that lived inside hollow mountains. I've always found those stories interesting, maybe too interesting. I'm 42 now, and my hair is already going grey. Not from age, but from stress, I think. I used to be a professor who studied folklore, old stories that people tell, but I lost that job when I suggested that some monster stories might be based on real creatures living underground. My colleagues called my ideas fringe and pushed me out of academics. So here I am, a mountain ranger instead. It's October 1989, and the trees are putting on the most amazing color show in decades. Bright reds, oranges, and yellows cover the mountainsides like fire. Tourists are flooding in from everywhere, which makes my job harder. More people means more chances for someone to get lost. For a moment, I enjoy the quiet up here. I pull out my notebook and jot down something odd I've been seeing. Strange fungi growing in perfect circles around certain Rocks. Perfect circles don't happen much in nature. Things like that make me wonder. My ranger station sits way up at 3,200 feet. You can only reach it by hiking for 4 hours up tough trails. If something goes wrong, helicopters can't even get to us. When the fog rolls in, which is often, I'm used to being alone, but sometimes the isolation gets to me. Yesterday, Victor Martinez, a local hunter who's been exploring these woods for 56 years, came to me with a strange story. He said when he fired his gun near Morgan Peak, the echoes came back all wrong. They were delayed too long and seemed to come from the wrong direction. I've been hearing similar reports from hikers. As I walk along the ridge, I notice something else strange. The bark on several trees has been stripped away, making perfect rings around the trunks. All at exactly 7 feet high, and all in perfect circles around certain clearings. No animal I know does that. The weather has been weird too. It's too warm for October, creating thick fog that fills the valleys during the day. At night, the fog rises up the mountainsides like ghost hands reaching up to grab something, or someone. My fingers find the smooth jade pendant hanging around my neck, a magatama, my Japanese grandmother called it. She gave it to me before she died, saying it would show the true form of spirits. I never took it seriously then, but lately I've been wondering about a lot of things I used to dismiss. As darkness falls completely, I turn my flashlight toward the trail back to my station. But I pause, looking over my shoulder at the mountain looming behind me. For just a second, I could swear I saw the rock face move, like someone taking a deep breath. Something is happening in these mountains, and I think I'm about to find out what the Abenaki people were so afraid of. That night in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to the day my career fell apart. I was giving a talk about my research when the room full of professors started laughing. I'd spent years collecting stories about creatures that might live underground, creatures that explained what people called monsters or cryptids. But no one believed me. Stick to real science, Nakamura, they said. 3 years later, my wife left too. Those mountains will swallow you whole, she warned as she packed her bags. You care more about your monsters than real people. Maybe she was right. I got out of bed and looked at myself in the small bathroom mirror. Years of hiking up and down mountains had made me skinny but strong. My hands were rough with calluses from rock climbing. My hair had gone grey early, making me look older than 42. But my eyes were still sharp. I noticed things other people missed. Small changes in plants, rocks, animal behavior. Those details kept me alive out here. Morning came with a knock at my door. Dr. Catherine Okoye stood there with a heavy backpack and a no-nonsense look on her face. She was a wildlife biologist sent by the Park Service to figure out why animals were acting so strangely. You must be the ranger who believes in monsters, she said, not smiling. I believe in paying attention, I answered. Come in. Catherine was 38, with short black hair and a quick mind. She didn't buy into my theories, but she respected the fact that I'd spent 8 years watching these mountains. I showed her my field journal, hundreds of pages of strange things I'd seen over the years. Rocks that felt warm when they should be cold, birds flying in shapes that birds don't make naturally, hikers getting lost in places where the trails were clearly marked. The park officials think I'm crazy, I told her. But everything in this journal happened. I saw it. She flipped through the pages, her face serious. I'm here for the science, she said, but I won't ignore evidence just because it doesn't. Fit what I expect. I liked her already. We set out to check the areas where hikers had gone missing. I didn't use GPS much. Batteries died too quickly in the cold, and signals got weird around certain rock formations. Instead, I navigated by watching moss patterns, tree growth, and the position of the sun. Catherine raised her eyebrows, but didn't comment. The Abenaki called this the mountain that breathes, I told her as we hiked. They said its breath drove animals crazy and tricked people into places that weren't there the day before. Folklore is often how people explained natural phenomena they didn't understand, she said. Maybe, or maybe they understood more than we do. By afternoon, we reached the north face of Morgan Peak, where 3 hikers had vanished in the past month. Search teams had reported getting confused and their equipment failing in this area. I put my hand on a rock face and felt something that made me freeze. Vibrations. Rhythmic. Too regular to be natural. "Feel this," I said to Catherine. She placed her palm against the stone and her eyes widened. "That's not normal," she admitted. "Seismic activity." Seismic activity doesn't have a rhythm. For the first time in years, I started to wonder if my old theories had been wrong. Not because they were too extreme, but because they didn't go far enough. What if the truth was much stranger than even I had imagined? As the sun started to dip behind the mountains, we heard a faint cry for help. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We looked at each other, knowing we had to investigate, even as the shadows grew longer and darker around us. 3 people are missing, Catherine reminded me. We can't ignore that. I nodded and tightened the straps on my backpack. "Stay close," I warned. "And if things get weird, weirder than this, we turn back immediately." I didn't tell her that I was already feeling like we were being watched. Not by something hiding in the trees, but by the mountain itself. We followed the sound toward a rocky slope we had passed earlier that day. But something was different now. Between 2 large boulders was a dark opening that I was certain hadn't been there before. "That's impossible," I whispered. "We walked right past this spot 3 hours ago." Catherine frowned. "Maybe we just missed it?" I shook my head. I don't miss things like cave entrances. Carefully we approached the opening. I called out, "Hello? Anyone in there?" My voice should have echoed, but the sound just disappeared. It was like the cave swallowed it whole. "That's not right," Catherine said, her scientific mind clearly troubled. She picked up a small rock and tossed it into the darkness. No sound came back. Above us, a flock of birds suddenly appeared, flying in a perfect circle. Not a rough circle like birds normally make, but a perfect, exact circle like someone had drawn it with a compass. As we watched, the birds dropped from the sky one by one, hitting the ground with soft thuds. Catherine rushed to examine one. "This isn't possible," she said, her voice shaking. "Its insides are liquefied, but the outside looks completely normal." The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the mountain air. We decided to set up camp nearby and investigate the cave in the morning. As I laid out my sleeping bag, I noticed something odd about the rock face beside us. Despite the temperature dropping below freezing, the stone felt warm to the touch, like it had been sitting in the sun all day. Even stranger, when I turned away to get something from my pack and looked back, I could swear the rocks had shifted, position slightly. It was subtle, a boulder that seemed a few inches to the left, a crack that ran in a different direction. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. The next morning, we found a hiker's camera half buried under some leaves. The case was cracked, but the memory card still worked. Catherine and I huddled together, scrolling through the photos. What we saw made no sense. The pictures showed massive stone structures inside the mountain, things that looked like doorways, stairs and pillars, all made of the same granite as the mountain, but clearly shaped by hands or something else. But these structures weren't visible to our eyes when we looked at the same spots. "It's been edited," Catherine insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Why would someone hike all the way up here to take fake photos, then lose their expensive camera?" I asked. We tried calling for help on the radio, but what came back shocked us both. Our voices played back to us, but backwards, the words unintelligible and eerie. Then, underneath our reversed voices, we heard something else. Words in a language I recognized from my anthropology days as an ancient Abenaki dialect that hadn't been spoken for hundreds of years. Catherine's face went pale. "That's not possible," she kept saying. but with less conviction each time. As morning turned to afternoon, things got even stranger. Parts of the rock face near the cave entrance became see-through for brief moments, like cloudy glass. Through these transparent sections, we could see honeycomb-like chambers inside the mountain, chambers that couldn't possibly exist without causing the whole mountain to collapse. "The geology is all wrong," Catherine said. "Mountains don't have empty spaces like that inside them. They can't." But what truly froze my blood was what we glimpsed moving inside those chambers. Tall, thin shadows with too many limbs, crawling along the walls at impossible angles. We set up equipment to measure vibrations in the mountain. Within minutes, our devices picked up rhythmic patterns, like a giant heartbeat coming from deep within the rock. Batteries that should have lasted days drained to nothing in seconds near certain formations. As we took readings near the cave entrance, both Catherine and I suddenly got nosebleeds. The pressure in my ears was intense, like being in an airplane. "That's dropping too fast, yet we were standing still. We need to mark our path carefully," I said, tying bright orange tape to a tree branch. "People get disoriented here too easily." But 3 hours later, when we tried to follow our markers back, they led us somewhere completely different. A trail that should have taken us to our campsite instead brought us to an unfamiliar clearing. Our compass readings made no sense. According to them, we were somehow inside the mountain while standing on its surface. "Paul," Catherine said quietly, her scientific skepticism cracking, "what is happening here?" I looked at the mountain looming above us, remembering the Abenaki stories of mountains that breathed and changed and hunted. "I think," I said slowly, "the mountain doesn't want us to leave." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and climbed to a high point with my binoculars. In the dim light, I scanned the mountainside, focusing on a distant cave opening I hadn't noticed before. That's when I saw it. Something crawled out of the cave. At first I thought it was a person. It had a head and limbs, but as I watched I realized it moved all wrong. Its joints bent in directions they shouldn't. Its skin looked smooth and grey, like polished stone. It moved like water flowing uphill, impossible and smooth. I almost dropped the binoculars. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I got back to camp, I didn't tell Catherine what I'd seen. Not yet. But as we packed up our gear, I felt a strange vibration through the soles of my boots. The vibration changed when we talked, almost like it was reacting to our voices. The mountain was listening to us. "Do you feel that?" I asked Catherine. She nodded, her face tight with worry. "It's like standing on a giant speaker, but it's responding to us, isn't it?" We decided to observe from a safe distance. Using a rocky outcrop as cover, we watched the entrance to the strange cave. What we saw next changed everything I thought I knew about the world. A group of the stone-like creatures emerged. They didn't use the cave entrance like we would. Instead, they simply came through the solid rock, as if the stone turned to liquid just for them. After they passed, the rock sealed up again, with no sign they'd been there. "That's not possible," Catherine whispered, but we both knew we were seeing it with our own eyes. The creatures moved across the cliff face like spilled paint, their bodies stretching and shrinking as they climbed vertical surfaces with ease. They had arms and legs, but too many of them, and their bodies could twist and bend in ways that made my stomach turn. "We need to warn people," Catherine said. "No one should come near this mountain." I pulled out my UV flashlight, something I carried to track certain animals at night. When I shined it on the rocks nearby, invisible markings lit up. Symbols and writing carved into the stone that couldn't be seen with normal light. "These are warnings," I said, recognizing some symbols from my anthropology days. Different languages, different time periods. People have been marking this place for centuries, trying to warn others away. As we made our way down a slope, I noticed Catherine staring into space. When I touched her arm, she blinked in confusion. "Paul, what happened?" she asked. "You've been standing there for almost an hour," I told her. "That's impossible. I just stopped to tie my shoe a second ago." Something was happening to our sense of time. Later, Catherine finished setting up our monitoring equipment in what felt like seconds, but my watch showed 30 minutes had passed. Then I turned to get something from my backpack, and when I looked back, she had been standing completely still for almost 20 minutes, believing only a moment had gone by. The deeper we went into the mountains territory, the worse it got. Open spaces felt like they were closing in around us. Distances seemed wrong. A boulder that looked 50 feet away would take 200 steps to reach. The ground beneath our feet changed too. Solid paths would suddenly turn soft like quicksand, but only under our weight. Rock handholds crumbled when we touched them, but stayed solid for falling leaves or animals. "It's like the mountain is fighting us," Catherine said. That's when we realized something even more disturbing. All the strange paths and disorienting effects were herding us toward the center of the mountain. Every time we tried to head back down to the ranger station, we'd find ourselves being subtly guided back toward a central point. We weren't the only ones. We encountered 2 other search teams who had the same experience. All of us were being drawn to the same place like moths to a flame. One of those searchers was Tim, a local guide I'd known for years. We were all picking our way carefully across a rock field when Tim slipped. He didn't fall far, just a few feet down to a lower ledge. Catherine reached down to help him up. What happened next will haunt me forever. As Catherine grabbed Tim's hand, the rock face behind him seemed to soften. Before any of us could react, the stone moved like thick mud, wrapping around Tim's body. He screamed as he was pulled backward into the rock. For a terrible moment, his face was still visible in the stone, mouth open in a silent scream. Then the rock hardened again, and he was gone. Catherine scrambled back, her hands shaking. "Did that just happen? Tell me that didn't just happen." But we all saw it. The mountain had taken him. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Now!" As we tried to find a way out, I noticed something odd. The strange creatures seemed to avoid me when I stood in certain spots. Looking down, I realized I was standing on small pieces of green jade that had fallen from my pendant. "Catherine," I said quietly, "I think I know something that might help us." I showed her my grandmother's jade Magatama pendant. "The creatures stay away from this. Maybe similar minerals hurt them somehow." We tested my theory by placing small fragments of the jade I had in my pack at different spots. Sure enough, the stone-like beings wouldn't cross those areas. "We can use this to make a path out," Catherine said, hope in her voice for the first time in days. But there was a problem. To escape, we had to pass through what I had started calling the breathing chamber, a massive hollow space inside the mountain where gravity itself seemed broken. In some spots, small rocks floated in midair. In others, a pebble dropped would fall sideways instead of down. "My grandmother said this pendant would show the true form of spirits," I told Catherine. "Maybe it doesn't just keep them away. Maybe it disrupts whatever power they use." As we hiked toward the chamber, I noticed something happening to my skin. Small grey patches had appeared, rough like stone. They hurt when I touched them, and they seemed to spread whenever I came in contact with the mountain's rock. My joints were getting stiff and painful too. "You're changing," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "The mountain is doing something to you." She was right, and it wasn't just my body. Inside my head, I could hear a voice, soft and familiar, like my grandmother's. But I knew it wasn't really her. The mountain was speaking to me, offering me ancient secrets if I would just stop fighting and let the change happen. "Don't listen," Catherine kept saying, squeezing my arm when my eyes would glaze over. "Stay with me, Paul." Finally, we reached the central chamber, a massive hollow space inside the mountain with walls that pulsed like they were breathing. And there, embedded in the far wall, was something that made us both freeze in terror. A giant face and body, like a huge person made of living stone. It was as tall as a 5-story building, with countless smaller stone creatures flowing in and out of its body like bees returning to a hive. They weren't separate creatures at all. They were like the cells of this one massive being. "It's part of the mountain," I whispered. "Or maybe the mountain is part of it." The voice in my head grew louder, more insistent. I could feel myself being pulled toward the giant figure, my own skin becoming more stone-like with each step. That's when I remembered something from my research years ago. The Abenaki people had stories about fighting the mountain spirits with sound, specific tones that hurt the creatures. "My radio," I said to Catherine, my voice sounding strange, even to my own ears. "Turn it on and crank up the feedback." She didn't understand, but she did it anyway. The radio squealed with harsh feedback. Immediately the stone creatures recoiled. The giant figure in the wall seemed to shudder. "The sound disrupts them," I said. "It breaks apart whatever holds them together." Catherine caught on quickly. She took the radio and found a spot where the chamber's shape made the sound echo perfectly. The high-pitched noise bounced off the walls, filling the entire space. The stone creatures began to crumble at the edges, their movements becoming jerky and confused. The massive entity in the wall writhed in what looked like pain. "Mark our escape route with the jade," I told Catherine. "Now." While the sound distracted the creatures, Catherine used pieces of my broken pendant to create a path toward a narrow crack that might lead outside. I held the screaming radio high, moving it to create the most painful echoes for our stone enemies. Just as we reached the crack in the wall, the whole mountain seemed to shudder. The floor beneath us tilted. For a terrifying moment, I thought the entire chamber would collapse on us. Instead, the crack widened. Whether from the mountain's movement or a deliberate opening, I'll never know. Cool night air rushed in. We squeezed through the gap and found ourselves on the mountainside, the stars bright above us. Behind us, the crack sealed shut with a sound like grinding teeth. We had escaped, but we hadn't won. That was 5 years ago. The official report says we got lost, hallucinated from lack of oxygen, and eventually found our way out. The other search teams never made it back. The mountain claimed them all. I never returned to my job as a ranger. I couldn't. Being near any kind of granite makes me physically sick now. The patches of stone-like skin on my body haven't spread, but they haven't gone away either. I spend my days traveling to mountains around the world, looking for signs of other hollow places. I mark them with warnings and jade pieces when I find them. There are more of them than anyone would believe. Catherine visits sometimes. She's the only one who doesn't think I'm crazy. She brings me news from the White Mountains, strange disappearances, unusual animal behavior. The entities are still there, still hunting. Just more carefully now. At night, I still hear the mountain's voice in my dreams, calling me back. Sometimes I wake up to find myself walking toward the door, my fingers turning gray and stiff. I know what that means. I'm running out of time. The change that started in that mountain is still happening inside me, just slowly. One day, I'll become like them. Until then, I'll keep marking the thin places where the mountain entities might emerge, leaving warnings for those who know how to read them. Because the hollow mountains are breathing, they're waiting, and they're hungry. My name is Michael Hayes. People call me Mike. I'm a ranger at Glacier National Park in Montana, and this is the story of how my life changed forever in the summer of 1963. The morning started like any other. I woke up to birds singing outside my cabin window. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky pink and orange. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes, enjoying that peaceful moment before the day truly began. My cabin isn't much, just a small wooden Building with a bedroom, tiny kitchen, and a porch that looks out over the most beautiful meadow you could ever see. But it's mine, and it's far away from everything else. That's exactly how I wanted it. I made my coffee the same way I always do, strong enough to wake the dead, as my dad used to say. Standing on my porch with that steaming mug, I watched a family of elk grazing in the meadow below. Their calm movements made me feel at peace. For a moment I forgot about the bad dreams that woke me up in the middle of the night. Those dreams have followed me from Korea. It's been 10 years since the war, but the faces of the men I lost still visit me when I close my eyes. That's why I came here to this quiet corner of the world. I thought maybe the mountains and trees could heal what doctors and pills couldn't. I sipped my coffee and touched the scar on my face, a gift from an explosion that killed 2 of my men. Some gifts you never asked for but can never return. Radio crackled on the table, breaking the silence. Out here, that little box is my only connection to other people. The nearest ranger station is 18 miles away across some of the roughest country you can imagine. Most days, that distance feels just right to me. Mike, you awake? Over. It was Joseph Miller, the only other ranger in this part of the park. I picked up the radio. Morning, Joe. What's got you up so early? Over. Something weird going on with the animals. They're acting strange. Thought you might want to know. Over. I was about to answer when I noticed something odd. The birds had stopped singing, not just a few, all of them. The forest around my cabin had gone completely silent. Even the insects seemed to be holding their breath. I'll check it out, I told him. Meet me at my cabin in an hour. Over. Roger that. Over and out. I put down the radio and reached for the compass my father gave me when I was just a kid. It was silver, with his initials carved into it. That compass had never let me down, not in Korea, not in the wilderness. But today, the needle was spinning wildly, like it couldn't find north. A strange fog began rolling in from the valley, thick and yellowish, moving against the wind. In all my years as a ranger, I'd never seen fog behave like that. Something was very wrong in my forest today. I put on my uniform, strapped on my gun belt, and packed my bag with supplies. Whatever was happening, I needed to be ready. The park was filling with summer tourists, and it was my job to keep them safe. As I laced up my boots, I thought about my wife, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since our last fight. She wanted me to come back to civilization, to stop hiding from the world. You can't run from your memories forever, she had said. Maybe she was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I stepped outside again and looked at the fog, now creeping up the hillside toward my cabin. The air felt heavy, like before a thunderstorm, but the sky was clear above the fog bank. For the first time since Korea, I felt a chill of real fear run down my spine. But I pushed it away. I was Ranger Michael Hayes. This was my forest, my responsibility. Little did I know that by the end of the day, everything I thought I understood about the world would be shattered forever. I was checking my supplies when I heard footsteps coming up the path to my cabin. Joe Miller appeared through the strange yellow fog, his usually cheerful face looking worried. Joe was only 29, about 10 years younger than me, with bright eyes that normally sparkled with excitement about every bird or plant he found. But not today, Mike, he said, trying to catch his breath. You gotta see these tracks. Joe pulled out his small notebook. He always carried it to sketch wildlife he spotted on his patrols. He flipped through pages of deer, moose, and bear drawings until he reached the newest sketch. It showed footprints unlike anything I'd ever seen before, human-like but wrong somehow. They were about 18 inches long, with 6 long toes spreading out from each foot. Where did you find these? I asked, feeling my mouth go dry. About 3 miles east, near Blackwater Creek. And that's not all. Joe's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I saw something. I can't exactly remember what it looked like, but I tried to draw it. He turned to another page in his notebook. The drawing was blurry, like he couldn't quite get the details right. It showed a tall, thin shape standing between trees. The proportions were all wrong for a human or any animal I knew. "I keep forgetting what I saw," Joe said, rubbing his forehead. "It's like my brain doesn't want to remember." I handed him a cup of coffee, noticing how his hands shook slightly as he took it. "Something's wrong with this forest, Mike," he said, looking out the window. "It's like the trees are watching us." I wanted to tell him he was being silly, but the words wouldn't come, because I felt it too, eyes on us from every direction. The radio crackled again, making us both jump. "Ranger station calling Hayes and Miller. Come in, over." I picked up the handset. "Hayes here, over. We've got 3 hikers reported missing in your sector, the Blackwater family. Father, mother, teenage son. They were supposed to check in at the North Lodge last night, but never showed. Their last known position was near Eagle Pass. And there's a storm coming in. Need you to begin search procedures immediately, over." I looked at Joe, and I could tell we were thinking the same thing. Eagle Pass was just a mile from where he found those strange tracks. "Copy that," I said. "We're heading out now, over and out." I gathered extra supplies, more water, first aid kit, emergency blankets. If the hikers were hurt, we'd need to be ready. Joe checked his gun, not something rangers usually do before a search, but something about those tracks had us both on edge. "Let's head out," I said, leading the way. As we walked, I asked Joe about Korea. I knew he was too young to have fought there, but talking about normal things seemed important right now. "My older brother fought there," Joe said quietly. "He didn't come home." I felt a pang in my chest. "I'm sorry. I lost men there too." "That's why you came out here, isn't it? To get away from those memories." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The guilt of surviving when others didn't was something I carried every day. After an hour of hiking, we reached a clearing that shouldn't have been there. I knew every inch of this forest, and this circular open space wasn't on any map. The ground was scorched black in spiral patterns, and every plant within the circle was dead. "What could have done this?" Joe whispered. Before I could answer, we heard a thundering sound. A herd of elk burst from the trees, running straight through the clearing and past us as if the devil himself was chasing them. But there was no predator in sight. "Animals don't run like that without a reason," I said, my hand moving to my gun. That's when we noticed the sound, or rather, the lack of it. The normal forest noises were gone, replaced by a low, humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere. "At once, do you hear that?" Joe asked. "Yeah," I said, "like a machine or something." We pressed on, following the trail toward Eagle Pass. The fog was getting thicker, making it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. That's when we found the backpack. It was torn to shreds, the fabric ripped apart like paper. No blood, but it was covered in a strange amber-colored sticky stuff. When Joe touched it, he yanked his hand back with a yelp. "Burns," he said, showing me his reddened fingers. I used a stick to open what was left of the pack. Inside was a water bottle with Danny Blackwater written on it. We'd found one of our missing hikers' belongings. I tried to call it in, but the radio just made a high-pitched whine before going completely dead. "Must be the storm coming," I said, though I didn't believe it. Joe looked at me, his face pale. "Mike, the trees!" I looked up and felt my heart skip a beat. The trees around us were swaying, all leaning toward us like they were reaching for us with their branches. But there wasn't a breath of wind. "We need to find those hikers," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "and we need to do it fast." As we started walking again, I caught a glimpse of something tall and impossibly thin watching us from between distant trees. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't tell Joe what I'd seen. One of us needed to stay calm, and right now, that had to be me. We followed the trail toward Eagle Pass, pushing through fog that seemed to get thicker with every step. My compass was still spinning uselessly, and now our watches had stopped too, both frozen at exactly 3:33 p.m. The temperature was dropping fast, which made no sense for July in Montana. "We should be at the creek crossing by now," I said, looking around. Nothing looked familiar anymore. "Maybe we took a wrong turn," Joe suggested, but his voice shook. He knew as well as I did that we hadn't strayed from the path. "That's impossible," I said. "I've hiked this trail 100 times, but the familiar landmarks were all wrong. A boulder that should have been on our left was now on the right. A bent tree I used as a marker was nowhere to be seen. Either we were completely lost, or something was changing the forest around us." My head started pounding, and I noticed a warm trickle from my nose. Blood. Joe was having a nosebleed too. "What's happening to us?" he asked, wiping his face with his sleeve. I didn't have an answer. I'd never experienced anything like this before, not even in the strangest corners of the wilderness. We came to a ravine filled with mist so thick it looked like white soup. According to every map, this ravine shouldn't exist. The Eagle Pass Trail was supposed to be mostly flat, with gentle hills, no deep valleys or canyons. "I don't like this, Mike," Joe whispered. "Let's try another route." I was about to agree when our flashlights began flickering, though we hadn't even turned them on yet. I pulled mine out and clicked the switch. The beam cut through the fog for a second, then faded to a dull glow. "Something's draining the batteries," I said. That's when we heard it, a call for help coming from the ravine. "Hello? Somebody there? Please help us." It was a man's voice, desperate and afraid. Joe stepped toward the sound. "That must be Mr. Blackwater." I grabbed his arm. "Wait, something's not right." The voice called again, but now it seemed to come from behind us. "Help! We're lost!" Then from our left, "Please, our son is hurt." The same voice was coming from 3 different directions at once. Joe's eyes widened. "How is that possible?" I pulled my gun, checking that it was loaded. "It's not. Stay close to me." The humming sound grew louder, making my teeth vibrate. The mist in the ravine began to swirl, forming shapes that disappeared when I tried to focus on them. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time. A pale figure with long, thin limbs moving through the mist. It walked upright, but wasn't human. Its legs bent backward at the knees like a deer's hind legs, and from its head grew what looked like antlers, spreading wide like bony branches. I raised my gun and fired without thinking. The bullets passed right through the creature, leaving rippling holes in its form that closed up again like water. It made no sound, just tilted its head as if curious about what I'd tried to do. In an instant, the temperature plunged so low that our breath froze in the air. Ice crystals formed on my eyebrows and beard. My hands went numb with cold. "We need to get out of here," I said, teeth chattering. "Now!" But Joe wasn't listening. He was staring into the mist with a strange look on his face. "I see him," he whispered. "I see my brother." I followed his gaze, but saw nothing except swirling fog. "Tommy?" Joe called, taking a step forward. "Is that really you?" "Joe, there's nothing there," I said, grabbing his shoulder. "It's trying to trick you." But Joe shook me off. "He's calling me. He says he knows what happened to the hikers." I tried to hold him back, but Joe pulled away, walking toward the ravine like he was in a trance. The closer he got to the mist, the colder the air became. That's when I noticed the trees. The branches were moving, whipping back and forth despite the still air. Roots pushed up from the ground around my feet, like fingers trying to grab my ankles. Even the rocks seemed to be moving, rolling uphill against gravity. The forest itself was attacking us. "Joe, come back!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the humming that now filled the air. I tried to follow him, but every path I took led me in circles, always ending up back where I started. The creature, whatever it was herding me away from Joe, forcing me to watch helplessly as my friend walked deeper into the mist. "Tommy," Joe said one last time, his voice dreamy and distant. Then he disappeared into the white wall of fog. "Joe!" I screamed, firing my gun into the air, hoping the noise would snap him out of it. But there was no answer, just silence, broken only by that terrible humming sound. I was alone now, and I knew with terrible certainty that I would never see Joseph Miller alive again. I stood there, frozen in more ways than one, watching the spot where Joe had disappeared into the mist. My breath made white clouds in the freezing air. This was impossible. It was July in Montana, but it felt like January in Alaska. "Joe," I called one more time, but deep down I knew it was useless. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around, gun raised, but saw nothing. Then another sound to my left, then my right. Something was circling me, staying just out of sight. I needed a plan. Without Joe, without working equipment, I had to think clearly. The fire watch tower. It was my only hope. It stood on the highest ridge, about 4 miles from where I was. If I could get there, I might be able to signal for help, but first I had to get my bearings. The sun was barely visible through the fog and trees, a dim, pale circle that told me which way was west. I'd have to navigate by sight, the old way. I started walking, keeping the sun on my right side to head north toward the tower. Every step was a struggle against the unnatural cold. My fingers and toes went numb, then painful. This kind of cold kills, and kills quickly. "Keep moving," I told myself. "Just keep moving." As I walked, I tried to make sense of what was happening. What was that creature? The old-timers in the park sometimes talked about spirits in these woods. Native legends about skinwalkers and wendigos, creatures that could mimic human voices, that hungered for human flesh. I'd always dismissed those stories as campfire tales. Now I wasn't so sure. A voice called out from the trees. Joe's voice. "Mike, help me, I'm hurt!" I stopped, knowing it couldn't be real. Joe was gone. This was the creature using his voice as bait. "Mike, please!" The voice was perfect, exactly how Joe would sound if he was scared and in pain. I kept walking, pressing my hands over my ears. More voices joined in, my men from Korea, calling out just like they had in those final terrible moments. Then Sarah, my wife, begging me to come home. "I know it's not real," I said out loud. "You can't fool me." Something large moved through the trees parallel to my path, just fast enough that I couldn't get a good look. It was herding me, I realized, pushing me in the direction it wanted me to go. I took a sharp turn to the right, trying to break free of its influence. That's when the ground shifted under my feet. A section of trail that had been solid dirt suddenly became loose stones. I slipped, sliding down a steep slope that hadn't been there seconds before. I landed hard at the bottom, the wind knocked out of me. Looking up, I couldn't see where I'd fallen from. The landscape had changed again, rearranging itself like pieces. On a game board, I checked my gun, 3 bullets left. Not much, but better than nothing. As I got to my feet, a wave of dizziness hit me. The edges of my vision darkened. I was succumbing to the cold. I had to keep moving or I'd die here. "You can't have me," I said to the forest, to the creature, watching from the shadows. "I'm not giving up." I started climbing a ridge that I hoped would lead to the tower. The going was tough, with loose rocks sliding under my boots and branches whipping at my face. Halfway up, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Joe's voice again, but different this time. "Mike," he said, his voice now a rasping whisper. "It's inside me now. It knows everything I know." I turned to see a figure standing among the trees below. It looked like Joe, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, his movements jerky like a puppet on strings. "It's hungry, Mike," the thing that wasn't Joe said. "It's been so long since it fed." "You're not Joe," I said, backing away. "Joe's gone." The thing smiled and its face stretched too wide, splitting at the corners of its mouth. "Parts of him are still here," it said, "just like parts of the others, the hikers, the ones before them, all part of the forest now." It took a step toward me, and I fired a shot over its head, a warning. "Stay back." The thing that wasn't Joe tilted its head. "We remember you from before, Ranger, from the war. The dead remember." Ice formed in my veins. How could it know about Korea? "We've been watching you," it continued, "waiting for the right time. You're alone now, no one to miss you." I fired again, this time aiming at its chest. The bullet passed through, leaving a hole that closed up like smoke. One bullet left. I had to make it count. I turned and ran, scrambling up the ridge as fast as I could. Behind me, the thing laughed with Joe's voice, then with the voices of a dozen other people all at once. The tower was visible now, a dark shape against the grey sky, just half a mile more. My lungs burned with each breath of freezing air. My legs felt like lead. The humming grew louder, filling my head until I could barely think. Branches reached for me, roots tried to trip me. The forest itself was trying to stop me from reaching the tower. Just a little farther, I gasped. Just a little more. I could feel the creature behind me gaining ground. I didn't dare look back. Every instinct told me that if I saw it fully clearly, I would lose my mind. With one final push, I reached the base of the tower. The old wooden structure loomed above me, 100 steps to safety. If I could just reach the top before the creature caught me, I grabbed the first rung of the tower ladder, my frozen fingers barely able to grip the icy metal. Every step was torture as I climbed higher, away from the ground where that thing waited. 20 feet up, I made the mistake of looking down. It stood at the base of the tower, not Joe anymore, but something far worse. Its true form was clear now, a towering, skeletal figure with skin stretched too tight over impossible bones. Its head was crowned with massive antlers, branching out, like dead trees against the sky. And its eyes, God, its eyes were burning holes in a deer skull face, ancient and hungry. Wendigo, I whispered, the old Native American legend suddenly making terrible sense. The creature tilted its head up at me and opened its mouth far too wide. From its throat came the voices of a dozen people all at once, men, women, children, all crying for help. I climbed faster, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. 50 feet up, 70 feet, almost there. The tower swayed in the wind that had suddenly kicked up. Below, the creature began to climb, moving like a spider, far too fast. With one last desperate effort, I pulled myself onto the platform at the top of the tower. The small cabin was boarded up for the season, but I broke the lock with the butt of my gun and stumbled inside. The space was small, just a desk, a chair, an old radio, and some supplies left by the fire watchers. Maps covered one wall, showing the entire northern section of the park. I slammed the door shut and pushed the desk against it, though I doubted it would keep that thing out for long. The cabin was freezing, but at least I was out of the wind. My fingers and toes had no feeling at all, bad signs of frostbite. My face felt stiff, like my skin might crack if I moved too fast. I tried the radio, but it was as dead as my handheld had been. No help there. That's when I saw the symbols carved into the wooden walls. Circles and lines and shapes I didn't recognize, except for one, a stick figure with antlers. These carvings were old, maybe decades or even centuries old. The native Blackfeet tribes had been here long before this tower was built. They knew about the Wendigo. They'd left warnings. Next to the carvings was a small shelf, and on it sat bundles of dried plants. I recognized sage and tobacco, traditional, native protections against evil spirits. A loud thud shook the tower as something heavy hit the side of it. The Wendigo was coming. I grabbed the plant bundles and a box of matches I found in the desk drawer. I didn't know much about rituals or spirits, but I knew fire was a universal cleanser. Another thud, harder this time. The whole tower shook. With shaking hands, I lit the sage bundle. Fragrant smoke filled the small cabin as I waved it around, focusing on the door and windows. "You can't have me," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You can't have this place." A horrible screech came from outside like metal tearing. The creature didn't like what I was doing. I lit the tobacco bundle next, remembering fragments of stories the old park ranger, Two Feathers, had told me years ago. Offerings to the spirits, respect for the old ways. "I respect you," I said to whatever might be listening. "I honor this land and its spirits. But this thing outside, it doesn't belong here, it's wrong." The temperature in the cabin suddenly plunged even lower. Frost formed on the inside of the windows in seconds. My breath came out in white clouds so thick I could barely see. The door bulged inward as something pushed against it. The desk scraped a few inches across the floor. I had one bullet left, and I knew it wouldn't stop the Wendigo, but maybe I could use it another way. I took aim at the propane lantern hanging in the corner of the cabin. If I hit it right, the explosion might not kill the creature, but fire could drive it back. Before I could pull the trigger, the window shattered. Long, bony fingers with too many joints reached through, grasping at the air. I fired. The lantern exploded, spraying burning fuel across the cabin. Flames licked up the walls, catching on the dry wood quickly. The Wendigo's arm caught fire, and it pulled back with a shriek that made my ears ring. The fire was spreading fast, too fast. I'd trapped myself in a burning tower with no way down, except past that thing. Smoke filled the small space. I dropped to the floor, coughing and searching for cleaner air. Through watering eyes, I saw the symbols on the walls glowing in the firelight. The native carvings seemed to pulse with their own inner fire, growing brighter as the flames spread. The Wendigo screamed again, but this time it sounded afraid. I crawled to the broken window and looked out. The creature was backing away from the tower, its burning arm held against its chest. It looked up at me with those terrible eyes, and I heard Joe's voice one last time. "It's afraid of the fire, Mike, and the symbols. Run while you can." Whether it was really some part of Joe speaking to me or just the Wendigo playing more mind games, I didn't know. But the advice was sound. I kicked the burning desk away from the door and stumbled out onto the platform. The metal was ice cold against my hands as I grabbed the ladder and started climbing down. The tower was fully engulfed now, flames shooting into the night sky. The Wendigo had retreated to the tree line, watching me with those burning eyes. I reached the ground and collapsed in the snow. Snow in July, impossible but real. Every part of me hurt from cold and exhaustion. The Wendigo took a step toward me, then stopped as burning debris from the tower crashed down between us. It hissed like 1,000 snakes and backed away further. I couldn't move. The cold had me in its grip completely now. My eyelids felt heavy. Sleep seemed so tempting. "No," I told myself, "get up." But my body wouldn't respond. I could only watch as the burning tower collapsed in on itself, sending a shower of sparks into the sky. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the Wendigo retreating into the trees, its form seeming to melt into the forest itself. And then nothing. I don't remember much of what happened next. Bits and pieces come back to me sometimes, like scenes from an old movie. I remember the cold, bone-deep cold that made me stop caring whether I lived or died. I remember the sky turning from black to grey as night became morning. I remember the Wendigo watching from the trees, its burning eyes never blinking, just waiting for the fire to die out so it could come for me. But most clearly, I remember the sun. It rose slowly, painting the sky pink and gold, just like on any normal day. Its light touched the treetops first, then crept down to where I lay half frozen on the ground. When the first rays hit the Wendigo, it made a sound like steam escaping a kettle. Its form seemed to waver, like heat rising from hot pavement. It backed deeper into the shadows, but the sun kept coming, pushing the darkness away inch by inch. The Wendigo hissed and shrieked, its body twisting in ways no living thing should be able to move. Then it turned and fled into the forest, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. But before it disappeared completely, it looked back at me one last time. And in that moment, I heard Joe's voice again, clear as day. "It'll be back when darkness falls, Mike. It's part of this place now." Then the creature was gone, melting into the shadows like it had never been there at all. I tried to stand but couldn't. My legs wouldn't work right. The cold had done something to me. Frostbite, probably, though it was impossible in summer. Except it had happened. The proof was all around me, patches of snow melting in the morning sun, ice dripping from tree branches, and the burned-out shell of the fire tower. I dragged myself toward the trail, every movement sending pain shooting through my frozen limbs. I needed to get back to civilization, to warn someone about what was in these woods. How long I crawled, I don't know. Time seemed to stretch and bend. The sun moved across the sky too fast, like someone was fast-forwarding the day. I kept thinking about Joe, about the missing hikers, about all the other people who might have encountered that thing over the years and never returned to tell about it. I was getting sleepy again. A bad sign. The cold was still in me, even though the day was warming up. If I fell asleep now, I might never wake up. That's when I heard them, voices calling my name. Real voices this time, not the Wendigo's tricks. Hayes, Ranger Hayes, search party. They'd come looking for us when we didn't report back. I tried to shout, but could only manage a weak croak. I pulled my gun from its holster and fired my last bullet into the air. Minutes later, 3 rangers burst through the trees, their eyes going wide at the sight of me. "Jesus, Mike, what happened to you?" It was Bill Thompson, the head ranger. "Cold," I mumbled, my lips barely working. So cold. They wrapped me in emergency blankets and radioed for a helicopter evacuation. One of them, a young guy I didn't recognize, kept looking at me strangely. "It's 85 degrees out here," he said. "How did he get frostbite?" Bill shushed him. "Let's just get him out of here." As they lifted me onto a stretcher, I grabbed Bill's arm. "Joe," I said, "and the hikers. It got them." Bill's face went grim. "We'll find them, Mike. Don't you worry about that now." But I knew they wouldn't. Not alive anyway. "The Wendigo," I whispered. "It's real. It's in the forest." Bill exchanged looks with the others. They thought I was delirious. Maybe I was. The helicopter came, its rotors beating the air like giant wings. As they loaded me aboard, I caught one last glimpse of the northern valley. The fog was gone now, the forest looking peaceful and normal in the afternoon sun. But I knew better. It was waiting down there, hiding in the shadows, becoming part of the forest itself. They found me 3 days after I went missing. 3 days that I have no memory of. The doctors said I had severe hypothermia and frostbite, which made no sense to them in the middle of summer. They said I was delirious, babbling about monsters and voices in the trees. They never found Joe, Miller, or the Blackwater family. The official report listed them as missing, presumed dead by exposure or animal attack. The fire tower burning down was blamed on lightning, even though there had been no storms. I spent 2 months in the hospital. My toes and the tips of 2 fingers had to be amputated because of the frostbite. The doctors kept asking how such a thing could happen in July. I stopped trying to explain. Sarah came to see me. We talked for a long time about what was important in life, about second chances. I moved back to the city with her once I was released. I never returned to ranger service. Some nights I still wake up hearing that humming sound, feeling those burning eyes watching me from dark corners. Every summer, hikers go missing in Glacier National Park. Most are found eventually, but some vanish without a trace. The rangers search, the volunteers comb the mountains, but there are places in those woods they don't go anymore. Places where the compass needles spin and the air turns cold even on the hottest days. I've told my story many times over the years. Most people think I got lost, hit my head, and imagined the whole thing. They say the cold was just shock, the visions just hallucinations. But sometimes someone will sit quietly through my whole story, not saying a word until I finish. Then they'll lean forward and whisper that they've seen it too. Something tall and thin watching from between the trees. Something with antlers and burning eyes, and I know the Wendigo is still there, still hunting, still hungry after all these years. If you ever visit Glacier National Park, stick to the marked trails. Stay with your group, and if the birds go quiet and you feel eyes on you from every direction, run. Run as fast as you can towards sunlight and people and noise, because in the northern valleys, under the whispering pines, something ancient and patient is waiting, and it knows your name before you even tell it. My name is Diana Wilson. I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for almost 15 years now. Before that, I worked search and rescue in Wyoming. I've seen things in these mountains that most people wouldn't believe, but nothing prepared me for what happened that summer. It was July, one of those perfect Montana days. The sky was clear blue and the temperature hit about 80 degrees. Tourists in shorts and t-shirts filled the trails, taking pictures of mountain goats and pointing at distant glaciers. Just another normal day at the park, until it wasn't. I was checking in at the Highland Trail outpost when my radio crackled. "Wilson, you seeing this?" It was Martinez from the North Lookout. I stepped outside and looked toward the north face of Mount Crowfoot. What I saw made no sense. A thick blanket of snow was falling on just one section of the mountain, nowhere else. Just that single face. The rest of the park remained bathed in sunshine. "That's impossible," I muttered, grabbing my binoculars. Through the lenses, I could see the snowstorm intensifying, swirling white against blue sky, no clouds above it, just snow appearing out of nowhere. "I've got hikers up there," I said into my radio. The Hoffman family and at least 2 solo backpackers checked in this morning. Within 30 minutes, I had assembled a rescue team. We loaded up with emergency cold weather gear, something we rarely needed in July, and headed up the North Trail. As we climbed higher, the temperature began to drop, not gradually like you'd expect, but in sudden bursts. One minute I was wiping sweat from my forehead. The next, I could see my breath. By the time we reached the edge of the snowfall, our thermometers read 20 degrees. 10 minutes later, as we pushed through increasingly heavy snow, it dropped to 0. After another 100 yards, -20. It made no sense. "Diana, this isn't natural," said Ramirez, one of our newest rangers. His words came out in thick clouds of vapor. "It was 80 degrees back at base. You can't have a 100-degree temperature difference over half a mile." "Keep moving," I said. "Those hikers won't last long in this." We found the first body near Fisher Creek. At first, I thought it was a statue, some kind of strange ice sculpture left by other hikers. But as we got closer, I recognized the bright red jacket of Peter Hoffman, the father from the hiking family. He was frozen solid, not like a normal hypothermia victim who slowly stiffens as they die. No, he looked like he'd been flash frozen in an instant. His eyes were wide open, his mouth in mid-scream. One arm was raised as if pointing at something on the ridge above. When I touched his jacket, it didn't feel like fabric. It felt like glass. When Ramirez accidentally bumped the outstretched hand, one of the fingers broke off cleanly, like an icicle. What scared me most was his skin. It sparkled with strange crystal patterns I'd never seen before, like snowflakes were growing under his skin rather than on it. We carefully wrapped the body and continued searching for the rest of the family, the snowstorm growing fiercer around us. We never found them. Back at base, the medical examiner couldn't make sense of the body. "It's like he was frozen in less than a second," Dr. Bennett said, shaking his head. "His blood didn't even have time to crystallize normally. I've never seen anything like it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of that man's face, frozen in terror, kept flashing in my mind. What had he seen up there? What had he been pointing at? The next morning, I went to the archives. If something this strange had happened before, maybe someone had recorded it. Sure enough, I found reports dating back to the 1890s. Every few decades, during unusually warm summers, hikers or climbers would disappear on the north face. Some were found frozen solid. Most were never found at all. I needed to know more, so I drove to the Blackfeet Reservation to visit George Running Bear. At 92, he was one of the oldest tribe members and knew the old stories better than anyone. We sat on his porch as the summer sun beat down. He sipped his tea and nodded slowly as I described what we'd found. "The cold maker," he said finally. "That's what my grandfather called it, the one who brings winter in summer." "What is it?" I asked. George's weathered face grew serious. "Not what who, a guardian. It protects the sacred places. When people disturb what should be left alone, the cold maker punishes." "Punishes how?" "It takes them," he said simply. "Takes their warmth first, then takes them to become part of it. Every person it takes makes it stronger." I thought about the crystal patterns on Peter Hoffman's skin and shivered despite the heat. As I was leaving, George grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "If you go looking for it, Ranger Wilson, you won't come back. The cold maker has been hungry for a long time." I nodded respectfully, but I had already decided I was going back up that mountain. People were missing, and whatever was causing these impossible freezings was still out there. The next day, I found an old research cabin near where we'd found Hoffman's body. Inside, dusty weather equipment sat on a desk. The logbook's final entry was from 1972. Temperature dropped 100 degrees in 8 minutes. "Something is outside the window. Not animal, not human. God help us." That's when I knew we were dealing with something beyond normal explanation, and I knew I would need help to find it. Back at my ranger station, I spread out the old journals I'd found in the cabin. One entry caught my eye. It was from a researcher named Dr. Miller, who'd been studying weather patterns in the park. Day 15. I saw it today, standing on the ridge, like a sentry. At first, I thought it was just ice reflecting the sun. But then it moved. It watched me. For a full minute before disappearing, the temperature dropped 30 degrees in its wake. This is no animal. I was still reading when my radio buzzed. A group of climbers on the north face were in trouble. Their call was breaking up, but I heard enough. Moving ice, not human, so cold. Then silence. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I needed experts, people who wouldn't panic when faced with the impossible. By that afternoon, I had my team. Dr. Reed Palmer, a climatologist who had been begging to study our weather anomaly. Sam Blackfoot, a local guide whose family had lived in these mountains for generations, and Zoe Thompson, a rookie ranger eager to prove herself. "This isn't just weird weather," I told them in the briefing room. "Something's up there. Something. Dangerous? You mean like a bear?" Zoe asked. Sam shook his head. "Bears don't freeze people." Dr. Palmer just smiled. "Fascinating hypothesis. I'm eager to collect data." I showed them the old reports, the journal entries, and the medical report on Peter Hoffman. "We're going to find the missing climbers," I said. "But we need to be careful, very careful." We headed out at dawn, loaded with the best cold weather gear the Park Service had. The weather was perfect again. Warm sunshine, blue skies. But as we approached the north face, we all felt the temperature beginning to drop. "It's already starting," muttered Sam. By midday, we found the climbers' camp. Their tent was frozen solid, like it was made of glass instead of fabric. When Dr. Palmer touched it with his ice axe, the whole thing shattered into 1,000 pieces. "This isn't normal ice," he said, examining a piece. "The molecular structure is all wrong." Their equipment was scattered around the camp, all frozen. A coffee mug with coffee frozen mid-pour, suspended in the air. A sleeping bag shattered like glass. Even their satellite phone was encased in strange, crystalline ice. "Where are the climbers?" Zoe asked, looking around nervously. That's when we felt it, a sudden drop in temperature, not gradual, but instant, like someone had flipped a switch. Our breath clouded thickly in front of us. "Look," Sam whispered, pointing up to the ridge above us. There it stood, at least 9 feet tall, vaguely human in shape, but made entirely of ice. Not solid ice, more like ice with something moving inside it. Through its transparent body, I could see what looked like organs, floating, pulsing. Its head had no real features, just smooth ice where a face should be. "The Frost Sentinel," Sam whispered. For a long moment it just watched us. I couldn't move. None of us could. There was something about its presence that froze you in place even before the cold hit. Then it stepped back and vanished over the ridge. "Did you feel that?" Dr. Palmer asked, finally finding his voice. The energy signature was off the charts. It was literally absorbing heat from everything around it. Sam knelt and touched the ground where the creature had stood. "The earth is frozen solid, and look," he pointed to the creature's footprints. Around each one, the ground was frozen in perfect circles, like ripples in a pond. We followed the footprints, climbing higher up the mountain. The trail led us to a section that wasn't on any official park map. There, we found evidence of recent digging, mining equipment, blasting caps, shovels. "This area is protected," I said. "No one should be mining here." Sam's face darkened. "This whole mountainside is sacred to my people. There are burial grounds dating back centuries. The Sentinel is protecting them," Zoe suggested. Sam nodded. "The legends say the Coldmaker guards sacred places. It punishes those who disturb them." "So those climbers, the Hoffman family, they stumbled into something they shouldn't have?" I asked. "Or they were working with the miners," Sam said grimly. "Either way, they trespassed on what should have been left alone." Dr. Palmer was busy taking readings with his equipment. "The energy patterns here are fascinating. It's like something is drawing all the heat energy out of the air itself." "We need to find those climbers," I said, "and the rest of the Hoffman family. If the Sentinel took them," Sam said quietly, "you won't like what we find." We climbed higher, following the strange footprints in the frozen ground. The air grew colder with each step. Even with our specialized gear, I could feel the chill seeping into my bones. Not normal cold. This was something deeper, something that seemed to freeze you from the inside out. None of us said it, but we all felt it. We were being watched. With every ridge we crested, every boulder we passed, I expected to see that towering figure of ice waiting for us. The silence was the worst part. No birds, no wind, no sound of water, though we were passing streams. Everything was frozen solid. Just before sunset, we found a cave entrance half hidden behind a frozen waterfall. The ice around it was strange, too smooth, too perfect. "It's been here," Sam said, touching the ice carefully. Inside, the cave walls glittered with that same crystalline pattern I'd seen on Peter Hoffman's skin. And there, arranged in alcoves like displays in a museum, were bodies. Dozens of them, perfectly preserved, frozen in their final moments of terror. Some wore clothing from decades ago, old-fashioned climbing gear from the 1920s, hiking boots from the 1950s. Yet they all looked like they died yesterday, their skin still flush, with color beneath the ice. And among them, still in their bright modern climbing gear, were the missing climbers from the camp below. "My God," whispered Zoe, "they're all so perfectly preserved." "They're not just preserved," said Dr. Palmer, examining one body closely. "Look at their eyes." I looked. Behind the frozen eyelids, I could see movement. "They're still aware," he said softly. "Still conscious somehow." That's when the cave entrance suddenly filled with swirling snow and the temperature plummeted. The Frost Sentinel had returned. "Run!" I shouted, pushing everyone toward the back of the cave. The Frost Sentinel filled the entrance, its icy body blocking out what little daylight remained. As it stepped inside, the cave walls crackled with spreading frost. The temperature dropped so fast my lungs hurt with each breath. We stumbled deeper into the cave, hoping to find another exit. Instead, we found a tunnel that led even deeper, into the mountain. Behind us, the slow, heavy footsteps of the Sentinel echoed on the icy floor. "There's a network of caves under this whole mountain," Sam whispered. "The old stories say they connect to the burial grounds." Suddenly, a blizzard filled the tunnel. Not outside, right there in the tunnel with us. Snow whipped around so thick I couldn't see Sam, who was just an arm's length away. "Stay together," I yelled, but my voice was swallowed by the howling wind. I felt for the wall, trying to keep my bearings. "I can't see." Zoe's panicked voice came from somewhere to my right. "Where are you guys?" "Zoe, don't move," I shouted. "Just stay where you are." But I heard her footsteps running, moving away from us, deeper into the blizzard. "Zoe!" I tried to follow her voice, but the snow was blinding. It shouldn't have been possible. A blizzard inside a cave. But nothing about this was possible. "Diana!" Dr. Palmer grabbed my arm. "We can't follow her. The temperature's dropping too fast." He was right. Even in our specialized gear, we wouldn't last long in this cold. We had to find shelter. "We need to get out of this tunnel," Sam said. "Find somewhere to regroup." We pressed on, following the cave wall, moving away from where the Sentinel had been. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the blizzard thinned. We found ourselves in a larger chamber with several tunnel entrances. "Zoe!" I called out. My voice echoed back, but nothing else. "We'll find her," Sam said, but his voice lacked conviction. We picked a tunnel that seemed to lead upward, hoping it might take us back to the surface. As we climbed, the air grew slightly warmer, still freezing, but not the bone-deep cold of the Sentinel's presence. Dr. Palmer kept checking his instruments. "I'm recording temperature variations that shouldn't be possible," he said. "And there's something else. The blizzard was making sounds." "What do you mean, sounds?" I asked. "Words," he said. My audio equipment picked it up. It's like the storm itself was speaking. Before I could ask more, Sam called from up ahead. "Diana, you need to see this." I hurried to join him. He was standing at a bend in the tunnel, looking at something on the ground. It was a perfect ice sculpture of a human figure, caught mid-run. It was Zoe. Her face was frozen in a scream, one arm outstretched like she was reaching for help. Just like Peter Hoffman, her skin had that strange crystalline pattern under the surface. "She's still in there," Dr. Palmer whispered, shining his light on her eyes. "Still conscious." I reached out to touch her face, but Sam grabbed my hand. "Don't. She's part of it now." "Part of what?" I asked. "The Sentinel," he said. "It takes them, makes them part of itself." As if to confirm his words, something strange happened. The ice that was Zoe began to melt, but not like normal ice. It melted inward, collapsing in on itself. In seconds, she was gone, leaving only a small puddle that quickly refroze into normal ice. "It's called her back," Sam said grimly. We continued upward, trying to find a way out. The tunnel began to widen, and I felt a faint breeze. We were getting close to the surface. Then the ice spikes came. Without warning, long, sharp spears of ice burst from the tunnel walls. One missed my face by inches. Another tore through Sam's coat sleeve. "Move!" I shouted. We ran, dodging as more ice spikes shot from the walls, floor and ceiling. It was like the mountain itself was trying to kill us. Sam was chanting something in his native language, some kind of prayer or protection, ritual. He pulled out a small pouch from inside his coat and began sprinkling what looked like herbs and tobacco on the ground as we ran. "What are you doing?" I gasped. "Trying to appease the spirits," he said, "to explain that we mean no harm." For a moment, the ice spikes stopped forming. We paused, catching our breath. "Is it working?" Dr. Palmer asked. Sam nodded cautiously. "I think..." He never finished. A massive spike of ice erupted from the ground, impaling him through the chest. His eyes went wide with shock. Blood spread across his coat, freezing as it flowed. "Sam!" I reached for him, but already I could see the ice spreading across his skin, that same crystalline pattern forming. In seconds, he was completely frozen. "Doctor." Palmer and I backed away as Sam's frozen body began to melt inward, just as Zoe's had done. Soon, there was nothing left. "We have to get out of here," Dr. Palmer whispered. We found a narrow crack in the tunnel wall that led to the surface. Squeezing through, we emerged on the mountainside. Night had fallen, and the stars glittered coldly above us. In the distance, we could see the lights of the ranger station. "There's a forest service cabin about half a mile down," I said. "We can shelter there." We half ran, half slid down the snowy slope. The unnatural cold followed us, but seemed to lessen the farther we got from the cave. The cabin was small but solid, 4 walls, a fireplace, basic supplies. We barricaded the door, and I got a fire going, while Dr. Palmer tried to radio for help. The radio was dead. "It's jamming the signal somehow," he said. Through the frosted window, we could see the snowstorm following our trail down the mountain. And in the center of it, the tall, icy figure of the Sentinel. It stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, just standing there, watching. "Why isn't it coming closer?" I asked. Dr. Palmer was reviewing the recordings he'd made in the cave. "Listen to this," he said. He played back the sound of the blizzard. At first, it was just howling wind. But when he slowed it down, I could hear words, not in English, not in any language I knew. "It's talking," I said. "Not it," Dr. Palmer corrected. "Them, all of them, everyone it's taken. They're all in there somehow, a collective entity, as if it heard us." The Sentinel moved closer to the cabin, but something strange happened when it reached the edge of the clearing. It stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall. It can't approach human dwellings, I realized. Not unless invited, like a vampire in the old stories. Dr. Palmer nodded. But it can still affect us. Already the temperature in the cabin was dropping. Our breath fogged the air. The fire seemed to be giving less heat. "It's pulling the heat out of the air," Dr. Palmer said. "It'll freeze us out." Outside, the Sentinel stood patiently, and now I could see something else. The ice of its body wasn't uniform. There were shapes inside it. Human shapes, faces pressing against the inside of the ice, like people trapped underwater, and I recognized some of them. Zoe, Sam, the missing climbers, and others, older faces from the frozen bodies in the cave. "They're all in there," I whispered. "Everyone it's ever taken." Dr. Palmer was huddled close to the fire, his scientific curiosity now overshadowed by very human fear. "What does it want?" "To protect the sacred places," I said, remembering what Sam had told us. "And to punish those who disturb them." Through the night, we took turns keeping the fire going as the cabin grew colder and colder. Outside, the Sentinel never moved, never tired. It just waited. By morning, the inside of the cabin was below freezing despite our efforts. The windows were covered in thick frost. The water in our canteens had turned to solid ice. Dr. Palmer was the first to show signs of hypothermia. His speech slowed, his movements became clumsy. I wrapped him in all the blankets we had, but it wasn't enough. "Diana," he said, his voice barely a whisper. It spoke to me. "What?" In my head while I was dosing off. They showed me things. What things? The miners. They disturbed old graves, artifacts. But it's more than that. The Sentinel, it's so old. Older than the tribes, older than humans in this land. His eyes were unfocused now. I shook him gently. "Stay with me, Reed. It showed me its beginning. A man. The first, caught in a blizzard centuries ago, but the blizzard wasn't weather. It was something else, something that found him, used him as a vessel, a seed." His breathing was shallow now. I knew he was slipping away. "And now it grows," he whispered, "with each person it takes. Growing stronger, spreading." Those were his last words. I felt his pulse fade away under my fingertips, and on his skin I could already see the first traces of that crystalline pattern forming. I was alone now, and outside, the Sentinel waited. I moved Dr. Palmer's body away from the fire. Already his skin was hardening, turning to ice from the inside out. Soon, he would melt away like Sam and Zoe had, called back to join the others inside the Sentinel. I was alone now. The fire was dying, and I was running out of wood. Outside, the sentinel hadn't moved. It just stood there, waiting for me to freeze or come outside. Think, Diana, I whispered to myself. What kills ice? Heat. It was the obvious answer. But how could I generate enough heat to harm something that could create blizzards out of thin air? I searched the cabin desperately. There were maps on the wall, old Forest Service documents, a few emergency supplies. Nothing that would help me fight. A creature made of living ice. Then I saw it, an old mining survey map tucked behind a more recent Park Service map. It showed the entire mountain, including tunnels and caves that weren't on any official maps. And there, near the center of the mountain, was something marked thermal activity, danger. A geothermal vent, a place where the heat from deep in. The earth came close to the surface. I remembered my basic geology. Glacier National Park sits near the edge of ancient volcanic activity. Most of it is dormant now, but there are still hot springs and geothermal areas throughout the region. This map showed something more serious. A chamber deep in the mountain where underground hot springs created a natural sauna of scalding steam and boiling mud. The miners had discovered it and marked it as a danger zone. It was also directly beneath the area where Sam had said the sacred burial grounds were located. That's it, I realized. The miners hadn't just disturbed sacred ground. They'd been about to break through into a geothermal chamber that could have caused a major collapse or even triggered dormant volcanic activity. The Sentinel wasn't just protecting sacred ground. It was preventing a natural disaster. But that same geothermal vent might be my only weapon against the creature. If I could somehow lure it into that superheated chamber, I checked my pack. I still had the emergency flares, a coil of rope, my knife, and most importantly, a small pack of mining explosives we'd found and confiscated from the illegal mining site. A plan began to form. It was desperate and dangerous, but I had no other options. The fire was nearly dead now, and the temperature in the cabin had dropped well below freezing. My fingers were starting to go numb. I couldn't stay here any longer. I bundled up as best I could, putting on every layer I had. Then I took Dr. Palmer's coat too, whispering an apology to him. I studied the map one last time, memorizing the route to the old mine entrance that would lead me to the geothermal vent. Then I opened the cabin door and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Even through all my layers, it cut, straight to my bones. The Sentinel stood exactly where it had been all night, watching me with its featureless face. "You want me?" I called to it, my voice thin in the freezing air. "Come and get me!" I ran, not looking back. I knew it would follow. Down the slope I went, but not toward the ranger station, toward the old mine entrance shown on the map. Behind me, I heard the crunch of ice as the Sentinel began to move. It didn't run like a human. It glided, almost like it was floating over the snow, and it was fast. I reached a frozen stream that blocked my path. In summer, it would be easy to cross on the stepping stones, but now it was a barrier of slick ice. No time to find another way around. As I hesitated, I felt the air growing colder. The Sentinel was getting closer. I stepped onto the ice. Immediately, I slipped and fell hard. Pain shot through my hip, but I forced myself back up. Halfway across, I heard a crack. Not the ice breaking, but the sound of the Sentinel creating an ice bridge right over the stream, allowing it to continue its pursuit without slowing. Finally reaching the other side, I spotted the old mine entrance partially hidden by fallen trees. The rotting timbers that had once supported the opening were now crusted with ice. I ducked inside just as the Sentinel reached the mine entrance. It paused there, as if considering. Did the same rule apply as with the cabin? Did it need an invitation to enter human-made structures? I didn't wait to find out. I moved deeper into the mine shaft, using my flashlight to guide me. The tunnel sloped downward, heading into the heart of the mountain. Behind me, I heard the crack and groan of ice. The sentinel had decided to follow. Its presence made the mine even more dangerous. As it moved through the tunnels, its intense cold froze the support beams. Old wood, already weak from decades of neglect, became brittle. Cracks and crashes echoed through the mine as sections began to collapse behind us. I was going deeper into the mountain, and my escape route was being cut off with every step. But I had to keep going. The map had shown that the mine connected with natural cave systems, which eventually led to the geothermal chamber. If I could just find that connection. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where the miners had set up an old base camp. Rotting tables, broken tools, and rusty equipment littered the space. And there, on the far wall, was a large crack, a natural fissure that the miners had begun to widen. That had to be it. The entrance to the cave system. Squeezed through the opening, feeling the change immediately. The air was warmer here and damp. I could smell sulfur, the rotten egg smell of geothermal activity. Behind me, the chamber filled with intense cold as the sentinel entered. The sudden temperature change caused the old support beams to crack loudly. The whole room was becoming unstable. I pushed deeper into the natural cave, moving as fast as I dared. The path sloped steeply downward now, and I could feel the temperature rising with each step. Sweat began to form under my many layers, a sharp contrast to the freezing cold I'd just left. Steam began to fill the tunnel, making it hard to see. The smell of sulfur grew stronger. I had to be getting close to the geothermal chamber, but was the sentinel still following? I paused, listening. The only sound was the hiss of steam and the distant bubbling of what had to be mud pots or hot springs. Then I felt it, that unnatural drop in temperature cutting through the steam like a knife. It was still coming. I pushed on, finally reaching the chamber. It was an enormous cave with a high ceiling lost in steam. Across the floor, pools of bubbling mud and water steamed and hissed. The heat was intense, like standing in a sauna turned up too high. This was it, the heart of the mountain, the place where the cold of the sentinel might finally meet its match. I quickly set to work, placing the mining explosives at the narrow entrance where I had come in. If I could trap the sentinel. In here, with all this heat, I had just finished setting the last charge when I felt the temperature plummet. The steam nearest the entrance began to crystallize, forming delicate ice patterns in midair before falling to the ground with tiny, tinkling sounds. The sentinel had arrived. It stood in the entrance to the chamber, its icy body gleaming in the dim light. Steam swirled around it, freezing into tiny crystals before falling to the ground. Even in this incredibly hot place, the sentinel brought its own winter, but I could see something happening. The outer layer of its ice body was beginning to melt. Slowly, little rivulets of water ran down its form. The heat was affecting it. I backed away, moving deeper into the chamber, closer to the bubbling mud pots. The heat was almost unbearable for me now, but I needed to draw the sentinel in further. "You've been protecting this place, haven't you?" I called to it. The sacred grounds, the mountain itself. The miners would have broken through to this chamber, maybe caused a collapse or worse. The sentinel took another step into the chamber. More of its outer layer melted away, and as it did, I could see the faces inside more clearly. Dozens of them pressed against the ice like people trapped underwater. Zoe, Sam, Dr. Palmer, and others, faces from different times, all watching me. "But you didn't have to kill them," I continued, taking another step back. "You didn't have to take them." The sentinel moved forward again. It was fully in the chamber now, steam rising all around it. The faces inside seemed to be moving more actively, as if the heat was waking them up. I reached the back of the chamber. There was nowhere else to go. My hand found the detonator for the explosives I'd set. "I understand now," I said. "You're not evil, you're a guardian, but you've gone too far." The sentinel raised an arm toward me. Sharp icicles formed at its fingertips, the same kind of ice spears that had killed Sam. I pressed the detonator. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Rocks crashed down as the entrance collapsed, sealing us both inside the chamber. Dust and steam filled the air, making it hard to breathe. When the dust settled, I saw that the Sentinel was still standing. But the intense heat of the chamber, now with no escape route for the steam, was taking its toll. Its body was melting faster now, water pooling at its feet. And as it melted, something strange began to happen. The faces inside became clearer, more distinct. Then one by one, they began to separate from the main body. First came Zoe, her form pulling free of the melting ice. She looked solid for a moment, a perfect ice sculpture, before she too began to melt. Then Sam, then Dr. Palmer, and others, each breaking away from the main body, forming their own ice figures before melting away. The Sentinel was losing mass rapidly now, shrinking as more and more of its stolen bodies pulled free and melted. Steam filled the chamber, making it hard to see. Through the haze, I noticed something at the core of the creature, a central figure that all the others had been built around. As the outer layers melted away, I could make out the shape of a human, wearing what looked like very old clothing. Native American burial clothes, preserved perfectly in ice for what must have been centuries. This was the seed Dr. Palmer had mentioned, the first person taken by whatever force had created the Sentinel. Around this central figure, I saw other things emerging from the melting ice. Old mining tools, broken and rusted, but clearly from an earlier time than the camp we'd found. European, in design, they looked like they could have been from the first explorers to reach this area. The central figure was the last to melt, revealing bones beneath the ice. Ancient remains that should have been left undisturbed. The chamber was growing, hotter by the minute. With the entrance sealed, the geothermal heat had nowhere to go. The steam was thickening, and I could hear rumbling from deep within the mountain. I needed to get out, and fast. In the back of the chamber, I spotted a narrow crack in the wall, a small tunnel that might lead to the surface. It would be a tight squeeze, but I had no choice. As I made my way toward it, the ground beneath me shuddered. The heat was triggering some kind of reaction, maybe the very disaster the Sentinel had been trying to prevent. A small geyser of boiling water shot up from one of the pools, nearly hitting me. I reached the crack and began to squeeze through. It was narrow and jagged, scraping my arms and legs as I pushed forward. Behind me, the rumbling grew louder. The tunnel sloped upward, which gave me hope. If it had been carved by water or steam escaping from the chamber, it might lead all the way to the surface. I crawled for what felt like hours, the tunnel gradually widening enough for me to stand bent over. The air grew cooler, and I could feel a faint breeze, a good sign. Finally, I saw light ahead, daylight. I pushed through a tangle of roots and emerged into the forest on the mountainside, about a mile from where the old mine entrance had been. As I pulled myself out, the ground shook violently. A dull boom echoed through the mountain, and a plume of steam shot up from somewhere behind me. Part of the mountainside was collapsing in on itself. I ran, not stopping until I reached a safe distance. Looking back, I saw that a whole section of the north face had caved in. The steam continued to rise, but the collapse seemed to have stabilized. 2 days later, I sat in the park headquarters, finishing my report. No one believed my story, of course. The official explanation was unexpected geothermal activity causing localized temperature anomalies and structural collapse. The bodies of Zoe, Sam, and Dr. Palmer were never found. Neither were the bodies of the Hoffman family or the missing climbers. The cave-in had buried the evidence too deep to recover. Requested leave time, which was quickly granted. They probably thought I was traumatized, making up stories about ice creatures to cope with losing my team in a natural disaster. Maybe they were right. Maybe what I'd seen was just my mind trying to make sense of something that couldn't be explained. Steam and shadows and fear creating monsters where there were none, but I know what I saw. A year later, I returned to the park. Summer again. Tourists in t-shirts enjoying the sun. I hiked up to a ridge overlooking the north face. The collapsed area was roped off, declared unsafe. As I stood there, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, I felt a sudden chill. Just for a moment, like someone had opened a freezer door nearby, and then a single snowflake drifted down from the clear blue sky. It landed on my hand, a perfect, intricate crystal. As I watched, it seemed to form a tiny face before melting away. Looked up at the mountain, at the place where the sacred burial grounds had been. The place where miners had almost triggered a disaster. The place where I had faced something impossible. I understand, I whispered to the mountain. You were just protecting what needed to be protected. Another cold breeze brushed past me, almost like a touch on my shoulder. Then it was gone, and the summer warmth returned. I turned and headed back down the trail, leaving the mountain to its secrets. But sometimes, on cold nights, I still dream of faces trapped in ice, looking out at a world they can no longer touch. And I wonder if somewhere deep in that mountain, the Frost Sentinel is forming again, gathering strength, growing, waiting for the next trespass that will bring its cold justice down from the heights. Because some things should be left undisturbed. Some places should remain sacred, and some guardians never truly die. They just wait, patient as winter, for their time to return. My name is Henry Sullivan. I've been a park ranger at Redwood National Park for almost 30 years now. At 52, I'm getting close to hanging up my hat. But these ancient trees have been my life. I've watched them grow, and sadly, I've watched too many of them fall over the decades. The redwoods are special. Some have been standing for thousands of years, taller than 20-story buildings. When you walk among them, it feels like walking in a cathedral. The air smells sweet and earthy, and the light filters through the branches in golden rays. It's peaceful here. At least, it used to be. It was a foggy Tuesday morning when everything changed. I was doing my usual patrol near Fern Canyon, checking the trails and making sure campers hadn't left any trash behind. The fog was thick that day, making the massive tree trunks look like they were floating. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of chainsaws in the distance. My heart sank. This section of the forest was protected. No logging permits had been issued here. These were old-growth trees, some of the oldest living things on Earth. I radioed back to the station. Kevin, I'm hearing chainsaws in Section 8. Any logging permits I don't know about? Kevin Meadows, my young deputy ranger, sounded confused. Negative, Henry. That whole area is strictly no-cut. Want me to call it in? No, I'll check it out first. Might just be some campers cutting firewood where they shouldn't. But deep down, I knew this was more than a clueless camper. The sounds were too professional, too many saws working at once. I followed the noise, hiking about half a mile off the main trail. As I got closer, the sounds suddenly stopped. All at once, like someone had flipped a switch. The silence was almost as unsettling as the illegal cutting. When I reached the site, what I saw made no sense. 3 large logging trucks were parked in a clearing. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Chainsaws, axes, hard hats. It looked like the loggers had been in the middle of work and just vanished. One chainsaw was still running, its blade half buried in a massive redwood trunk. I switched it off, and the sudden quiet made my skin crawl. "Hello?" I called out. "Forest Service, anyone here?" No answer except for the drip of morning dew from the ferns. I checked the trucks. Keys were still in the ignition. Lunches sat uneaten, on seats. Thermoses of coffee were still warm. It was like everyone had been suddenly snatched away in the middle of their workday. As I looked around more carefully, I noticed something odd about the trees. Several saplings near the edge of the clearing seemed taller than they had been when I'd walked past. It sounds crazy, but I could swear they'd grown several inches in the short time I'd been there. I took photos of everything with my phone and collected some ID badges left behind. As I turned to head back to the ranger station, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt wrong, like I was being watched. I looked back at the trees. For a second, just a split second, I thought I saw the ferns moving. Not swaying in the breeze, but reaching toward me. I blinked, and they were still again. "You're getting jumpy in your old age, Henry," I muttered to myself. But as I hiked back to the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that forest had changed. The familiar paths felt different somehow. Darker, like the trees were leaning in, listening, and that was just the beginning of the strangest week of my life. Back at the ranger station, I spread the photos across my desk, while Kevin looked over my shoulder. "This doesn't make sense," he said, picking up a photo of the abandoned chainsaw. "Nobody just leaves equipment like this. That saw alone costs nearly $1,000. I nodded, sorting through the ID badges I'd collected. 5 men, according to these, all from Pacific Northwest Logging Company. I picked up the phone and called the company's office. After a few transfers, I got their operations manager on the line. "Yes, we had a crew in that area," she confirmed, her voice tight with worry. "They were supposed to check in last night. When they didn't, we thought maybe they were out of cell range." "Ma'am, they didn't have permission to cut in that section," I said. "That's protected forest." A long pause. "That's not possible. We have permits for Section 12 east of Fern Canyon." "This was Section 8, west side." Another pause. "That's not right." Our GPS coordinates were clear. After I hung up, Kevin was already at the filing cabinet pulling records. "Henry, you need to see this," he said, spreading out some papers. 3 other logging crews have disappeared in the past month. All filed plans to work in approved areas, but were found in protected zones. "Found? So they turned up?" Kevin shook his head. "No, just their equipment, like what you saw today. Nobody ever found the people." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "That can't be right. We would have heard about missing persons cases." "That's just it," Kevin said, flipping through more files. Each company reported them as no-shows after the first day, like they never even made it to the forest. Nobody checked the actual sites until days later. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of it. "Get me the historical records. Let's see if anything like this has happened before." While Kevin went to the archives, I decided to go back to the site. Something wasn't adding up. The fog had lifted by the time I returned to the clearing. In the clearer light, I noticed things I'd missed earlier. The cuts in the trees weren't clean. They were jagged, as if the saws had been yanked away mid-cut. I walked the perimeter of the clearing, studying the ground for footprints or signs of struggle. Nothing seemed to show which way the loggers had gone. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On a nearby tree, partially hidden by shadow, was a human hand. Not severed and bloody like in a horror movie. This was worse. The hand was embedded in the tree trunk. The flesh and wood fused together as if the tree had grown around it. Fingers stretched outward like they were trying to pull free. I stumbled, backward, my breath catching. This couldn't be real. I forced myself to take a photo, then touched the hand with a trembling finger. It was solid, warm like living flesh, but unmovable as stone. I hurried back to the ranger station, my mind racing. Kevin had stacks of old records spread across the table. "You're not going to believe this," he said, not looking up. "I found reports going back to the 1880s. Same pattern. Loggers disappear, equipment left behind, always in the old growth areas." I showed him the photo of the hand in the tree. His face went pale. "The locals have stories," he said quietly. "My grandmother used to tell me the forest protects itself. I always thought it was just a scary bedtime story." "Kevin, trees don't eat people," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "You ever notice how perfect some of those groves are?" Kevin asked. "Too perfect. Like the trees are standing in exact patterns," I had noticed. I'd always written it off as selective logging, creating the appearance of patterns. Now I wasn't so sure. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that hand, reaching out from the tree. I decided to go through the old ranger logs, looking for anything unusual. Around midnight, I found a weathered journal from 1937. A ranger named Thomas Wright had documented strange amber-like sap formations containing perfectly preserved insects. Some, he noted with surprise, appeared to be extinct species. At dawn, I packed my gear. I needed to see those sap formations for myself. If they were still there after all these years, it would confirm something truly strange was happening in my forest. As I headed out, the phone rang. It was the sheriff's office. We found an old logger who says he knows what happened to those missing men, the deputy said. Says it's happened before, back when he was cutting in 37. He won't talk to us, but he said he'll talk to the head ranger. I changed course and drove to the address they gave me. I needed answers, and it sounded like Walter Jameson might have them. What the old man told me would change everything I thought I knew about the ancient redwoods I'd spent my life protecting. Walter Jameson lived in a small cabin on the edge of town. At 91, his body was frail, but his eyes were sharp as he invited me inside. Been waiting 60 years for someone to come ask about what I saw, he said, hands shaking as he poured coffee. Nobody believed me back then, called me crazy or a drunk. I'm listening, I told him, taking out my notebook. Walter's story spilled, out like he'd been holding it in forever. In 1937, he'd been part of a logging crew, cutting near Fern Canyon. One foggy morning, he wandered away from the group to relieve himself. That's when I saw it, he said, leaning forward, standing between two giant redwoods. At first I thought it was a deer, big as a moose though, but wrong somehow. Wrong. How? I asked. Its skin wasn't skin. It was bark like a tree. And its antlers weren't antlers. They were branches with little leaves growing on them. Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. It looked right at me. Then it just stepped backward into a tree and vanished, like the tree swallowed it up. When Walter returned to his crew, they were gone. Just like the loggers I'd found yesterday. All their equipment was there, some saws still running. I quit logging that day, Walter said. Some things ain't meant to be understood. I left Walter's place with more questions than answers. On the drive back to the station, I called Kevin. I need you to find any reports of unusual animal sightings in the park, specifically anything described as part deer, part tree. Already on it, Kevin replied. And you've got a visitor waiting. Dr. Rebecca Chen from the University Research Center says she specializes in unusual plant growth. Perfect timing. I needed a scientist's perspective on all this. Dr. Chen was young, maybe mid-30s, with practical hiking clothes and a no-nonsense manner. She shook my hand firmly. I read your report about the accelerated growth patterns, she said. If it's real, it could be groundbreaking. I didn't mention the hand in the tree or Walter's story yet. Better to start with the science. We headed back into the forest, this time with Kevin joining us. Dr. Chen brought equipment I'd never seen before. Sensors to measure electrical activity in plants, growth monitors, soil testing kits. As we hiked deeper into the old growth section, I noticed something I'd somehow missed all these years. The trees weren't random. They stood in perfect geometric patterns, circles, straight lines, even what looked like a spiral pattern when viewed from a certain angle. This isn't natural, Dr. Chen said, looking up at the massive trees. Trees don't grow like this. Could they have been planted this way? Kevin asked. Dr. Chen shook her head. Some of these trees are over 1,000 years old. Nobody was planning forest layouts like this back then. She set up her equipment while Kevin and I searched the area. I found what I was looking for about half a mile from the abandoned logging site, amber-like sap formations hanging from tree branches. Inside one, perfectly preserved, was a small bird that looked like no species I recognized. Dr. Chen carefully collected a sample, her face serious. "We need to get this to my lab." But what we found next changed everything. Kevin called us over to a massive fallen log he'd been examining. "Look at these roots," he said, pointing to where the tree had uprooted. "They're fused with the roots from that tree over there." Dr. Chen knelt down, her eyes wide. "This shouldn't be possible. These are different species of trees." She pulled out a small device and pressed it against the wood where the roots joined. It made a soft, beeping sound. "There are electrical signals passing through these roots," she said, like nerve impulses, simplified but similar to neural pathways. "The trees are talking to each other?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around it. "Not talking exactly, but communicating somehow, yes," she replied. "I need to set up monitoring equipment overnight." We established a small camp. As darkness fell, the forest seemed different. The usual nighttime sounds, insects, owls, the rustle of small animals, were gone. It was too quiet. Around midnight, I took first watch while Kevin and Dr. Chen slept. That's when I saw it. In the moonlight, a branch from a nearby tree slowly, very slowly, moved, not swaying in the wind. There was no wind. It moved like an arm reaching out, bending in a way branches shouldn't bend. I wanted to wake the others, but I was frozen in place, watching as the branch stretched toward our camp, then stopped, as if sensing my awareness. By morning, the branch was back in its original position. I would have thought I'd dreamed it if not for the trail of disturbed moss showing its path. Dr. Chen's overnight readings confirmed something impossible. The trees around us had moved several inches during the night, their roots shifting under the soil. "We need to go deeper in," I decided. "Find where those loggers disappeared." Kevin looked nervous but nodded. Dr. Chen was already packing her equipment, her face showing both fear and scientific excitement. We hiked for hours, following what seemed like a trail of subtly altered trees. That's when we found him. One of the missing loggers. But he wasn't dead like I'd expected. He was half emerged from a massive redwood trunk, like he was walking out of it or being absorbed into it. His body from the waist down was fully fused with the wood. His eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. He's still alive," Dr. Chen whispered, checking his pulse. "But it's like he's in some kind of suspended animation." Kevin turned away, looking sick. I couldn't blame him. The sight was horrifying. As Dr. Chen examined the man, Kevin suddenly yelped. A large branch had fallen, striking his arm and leaving a deep gash. I cleaned and bandaged the wound as best I could, but something wasn't right. Dark splinters were embedded deep in the cut, and they seemed to be spreading under his skin like tiny roots. "We need to get him to a hospital," I said. "No time," Dr. Chen said, examining Kevin's arm through a portable microscope. "Look." The splinters were growing, branching out in his flesh like miniature tree roots. Kevin's face went pale. "What's happening to me?" Before anyone could answer, we heard a sound from deeper in the forest. A sound like wood creaking and snapping, but rhythmic, almost like footsteps. Something was coming our way. We froze, listening to the strange footsteps coming closer. I motioned for Kevin and Dr. Chen to stay low. Through the trees, just as dusk was falling, we saw it. Walter's description hadn't done it justice. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall. Its body resembled a deer, but much larger, with legs, like tree trunks and skin that looked exactly like redwood bark, complete with deep furrows and moss patches. Its head bore massive antlers that weren't made of bone, but living branches, complete with small leaves that glowed with a faint blue light. It moved slowly, deliberately, stopping every few steps to press its nose against a tree trunk. When it did, the tree would shudder slightly, and tiny glowing spores would float from the creature's antlers to settle on the bark. "It's seeding the trees," Dr. Chen whispered, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. The creature's head snapped, up looking in our direction. We ducked lower behind the fallen log we were using for cover. It stood motionless for what felt like forever, then continued on its way, disappearing into the deepening shadows. "The Grovekeeper," Kevin murmured, his face pale with pain and fear. The splinters in his arm had spread further, creating web-like patterns under his skin that looked disturbingly like a root system. "What did you call it?" I asked him. "Grovekeeper. I don't know why that name came to me. I can feel it somehow." Kevin looked down at his arm with horror. "Like it's in my head." Back at our camp, Dr. Chen examined Kevin's arm again. The wooden tendrils had spread past his elbow now. "I need to get back to the ranger station," I decided. "Call for help, get a medical team in here." "No," Kevin said, his voice suddenly panicked. "No outsiders. It won't like that." Dr. Chen and I exchanged worried glances. Whatever was happening to Kevin was affecting his mind too. "I'll go alone," I told Dr. Chen. "You stay with him. Keep notes on whatever this is." The hike back should have taken 2 hours. Instead, it took 5. Paths that had been clear before were now overgrown. Twice, I found myself walking in circles, landmark trees somehow appearing in places they hadn't been before. When I finally reached the ranger station, I went straight to the old archives. There had to be more information about this creature. This Grovekeeper. In a dusty box labeled "Local History Not Official," I found what I was looking for. Cave paintings photographed in the 1920s from the local indigenous tribe showed a figure identical to what we'd seen. Half deer, half tree, with glowing antlers. According to the notes, the tribe considered certain redwood groves sacred and never cut trees there. They believed a forest spirit watched over the oldest trees, protecting them from harm. They left offerings before taking any wood from the forest. I tried calling for help, but the phones were dead, the radio too. When I checked outside, I found the lines had been cut, or rather strangled by vines that had grown around them overnight. I grabbed supplies, medical kits, and a flare gun before heading back. This time I brought old maps from the 1800s, hoping they might show the forest's original layout before modern trails were cut. It was dark by the time I made it back to camp. Dr. Chen looked exhausted. "His condition is progressing rapidly," she said quietly, nodding toward Kevin, who was sleeping fitfully. "The wooden structures have reached his shoulder and are spreading toward his chest." "What is it? A disease? A parasite?" I asked. "Neither. She struggled for words. "It's almost like he's being colonized, transformed." She showed me her notes and findings, trying to make sense of the impossible. "That creature we saw isn't protecting the forest," she explained. "It's farming it. The patterns of growth, the selective pressure on certain trees. It's cultivation. It's breeding the trees for specific traits." "Trees can't breed that way," I argued. "Not naturally, no. But whatever this Grovekeeper is, it's accelerating a process that would normally take thousands of years of evolution." She showed me readings from her equipment. These growth patterns aren't random. They're precisely controlled. And the trees that Logger was cutting, they have unique genetic properties. They grow faster, produce stronger wood, and contain compounds I've never seen before. Kevin stirred and sat up. Dark lines now traced up his neck, disappearing into his hairline. His eyes had taken on a strange amber color. "I can hear it," he said, his voice eerily calm. "In my head. It's so old, so patient." "What does it want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "To perfect the forest. It's been working for centuries, selecting the best traits, pruning away the weak." Kevin's voice had taken on an odd rhythm, like he was reciting something. "Humans are destroying too much, too fast. Climate change, deforestation. Its work is threatened." "What work?" Dr. Chen asked. "The perfect tree," Kevin replied. "Self-defending, adaptive to rapid climate shifts, capable of accelerated growth and—" He trailed off, his eyes going wide. And mobility. A chill ran down my spine. Mobile trees, Kevin nodded slowly. It wants forests that can retreat from threats, move to better conditions, survive what's coming. What happens to the loggers? I asked, dreading the answer. Nutrients, Kevin said simply, and test subjects. It learns from them, incorporates useful traits. Dr. Chen looked horrified. The creature is using humans as genetic material? Not just humans, Kevin said. All animals. It takes what's useful. Eyes to see, muscles to move, brains to think. I showed them the old maps I'd brought. Look here. This area was marked as sacred by the native tribes. It's the same place where the loggers disappeared. Dr. Chen studied the map. That's where we saw the Grovekeeper. It's protecting that specific grove. I thought about what Kevin had said. If it's been doing this for centuries, there must be a central point, a place where it started. Kevin's eyes seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. The first tree. The oldest one. Do you know where it is? I asked him. He nodded slowly. I can feel it, like a heartbeat in the ground. We need to find it, Dr. Chen said. If this creature is controlling the forest through some kind of network, that tree might be the central node. Kevin looked at me with eyes that were less and less human by the hour. It knows we're talking about this. It's watching us right now. As if on cue, the trees around our camp shifted slightly, their branches bending toward us like curious fingers. We needed to move quickly. Whatever Kevin was becoming, he was losing his humanity fast. And I had a feeling the Grovekeeper wouldn't let us leave the forest alive now that we knew its secret. Dawn broke with an unnatural green mist hanging between the trees. We packed quickly, following Kevin as he led us deeper into the forest. The wooden patterns had now spread across his face, creating swirling designs that looked almost like tree rings. His movements were stiff, jerky, as if his joints were hardening. Not much time, he said, his voice raspy like leaves rustling. I can feel myself changing. Dr. Chen walked close to him, taking notes and readings. Her scientific mind was still working, even in this nightmare. The transformation is accelerating, she whispered to me. At this rate, he'll be fully integrated within hours. I checked my backpack, making sure the flare gun was loaded. I'd also brought a small can of gasoline from the ranger station's emergency supplies. I wasn't sure what we'd need to do when we found the first tree, but I wanted options. The forest grew older as we walked, the trees massive and ancient. The patterns in their arrangement became more obvious. Perfect circles, spirals, and lines that couldn't possibly be natural. We're getting close, Kevin said, stopping in a small clearing. It knows we're coming. It's curious. Can you communicate with it? Dr. Chen asked. Kevin nodded slowly. Not with words. It doesn't think like we do. It thinks in seasons, in centuries. But it's aware of us, especially you, Henry. Me? Why me? You've been here the longest, watching. The forest. It's been watching you too. That thought sent a chill down my spine. We pushed on, the forest becoming denser. Strange amber sap formations hung from branches like frozen tears, each containing perfectly preserved insects, leaves, even small animals. It's storing genetic material, Dr. Chen explained, examining one containing a red squirrel that looked perfectly alive inside its amber prison. Cataloging life forms. Suddenly the ground beneath us trembled, not like an earthquake, more like a giant taking a step. Run! Kevin shouted, his voice more urgent than it had been in days. We ran blindly through the trees. Behind us I heard the sound of wood cracking, of roots tearing free from soil. I glanced back and immediately wished I hadn't. The trees were moving. Actually moving. Massive trunks were pulling their roots from the ground, taking ponderous steps like ancient wooden giants. The grove is waking up, Kevin gasped as we took shelter behind a large boulder. It's never done this before, not all at once. Why now? Dr. Chen asked, her scientific curiosity somehow still intact despite our terror. It feels threatened, Kevin replied. By us. By what we know. We waited until the sounds of movement faded, then continued more carefully. Kevin led us toward what he said was the center of the forest, the oldest part. There, he finally said, pointing ahead. In a sunlit clearing stood the largest redwood I'd ever seen. It had to be over 3,000 years old, its trunk wider than a house, its top lost in the mist above. Unlike the other trees we'd seen, this one seemed untouched by the Grovekeeper's influence. No glowing spores, no unnatural patterns in its bark. The first tree, Kevin whispered reverently. It's the only one the Grovekeeper doesn't control. We approached cautiously. The massive tree had a hollow section near its base, large enough for us to step inside. It's a sanctuary, Kevin said. The Grovekeeper can't sense us when we're inside it. We ducked into the hollow, and I immediately felt safer, though I couldn't explain why. Something about this ancient tree felt protective, almost kind compared to the menace of the forest outside. Kevin slumped against the inner wall of the tree, breathing heavily. The wooden patterns had now covered most of his body, and small leaf buds were forming along the tendrils on his arms. I don't have much time left, he said, but I can tell you what I know now. Through their mental connection, Kevin had learned the Grovekeeper's history. It had once been human, a shaman from the indigenous tribe that had lived here centuries ago. During a time when settlers were cutting down vast sections of forest, the shaman had performed a ritual to merge with the forest, becoming its guardian. But over the centuries, the merged consciousness had become less human and more alien. It had started experimenting, using its ability to control plant growth to selectively breed trees with specific traits. It's afraid, Kevin explained. It can sense the climate changing, droughts, fires. It's trying to create trees that can survive what's coming. By kidnapping loggers? I asked. It sees humans as both enemies and resources, Kevin said. It takes what it needs, adaptability, intelligence, mobility. Where is it keeping them? Dr. Chen asked. Kevin struggled to find words. There's a chamber underground, a root cellar, but massive. That's where it studies them. Then Kevin told us something that gave us hope. The Grovekeeper wasn't all-powerful. It could only control trees it had personally seeded with its spores. And its original human remains, the physical anchor of its consciousness, were still preserved inside the heartwood of a specific tree. Which tree? I asked. Kevin pointed outside. The largest one in the sacred grove, the one that looks like it has a face in its trunk. If we destroy those remains, Dr. Chen began, it might break its control over the forest, I finished. Kevin nodded, then winced in pain as more wooden tendrils spread across his face. But you'll need to distract it first. It guards that tree constantly. We formed a desperate plan. I would create a diversion with fire at the edge of the grove, something the Grovekeeper would immediately sense as a threat. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen would reach the central tree with the explosives we'd made from the gasoline and some chemical equipment she had. Kevin's role was the most dangerous. As his transformation progressed, he would surrender partially to it, introducing human consciousness into the Grovekeeper's network and creating confusion. It's never absorbed a mind that was aware of what was happening, he explained. The shock might distract it long enough. As dusk approached, we put our plan into action. Kevin stayed in the hollow of the first tree until the last possible moment. Henry, he said as I was about to leave, if this works, don't let anyone cut down these trees. They're not evil, they're just trying to survive like everything else. And I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Kevin had been more than my deputy, he'd been my friend. The diversion worked better than expected. When I set fire to a dead log at the edge of the grove, the reaction was immediate and terrifying. Every tree in sight shuddered and swayed, their branches reaching toward the fire like arms trying to smother it. In the confusion, Dr. Chen made her way to the central tree. But the Grovekeeper was smarter than we'd anticipated. It manifested its physical form, that massive deer-like creature with bark for skin, directly in her path. I watched in horror from my hiding place as the creature approached her. She stood her ground, the improvised explosives clutched in her hands. That's when Kevin made his move. Now more tree than human, he stepped from behind a trunk and reached out toward the nearest Grovekeeper-controlled tree. Where his wooden fingers touched the bark, a visible shockwave rippled through the forest network. The Grovekeeper froze, its massive head turning toward Kevin. I could almost feel its confusion as it sensed human consciousness spreading through its carefully maintained network. Dr. Chen seized the moment, rushing toward the central tree. She placed the explosives at its base, right where a strange knot in the wood resembled a human face. The Grovekeeper roared, a sound like 1,000 trees creaking in a storm, and charged toward her. I fired the flare gun, the bright red light momentarily blinding the creature. Dr. Chen scrambled away from the tree, fumbling with the matchbook we'd planned to use as a delay fuse. But before she could light it, the Grovekeeper recovered and sent wooden tendrils shooting from the ground, impaling her leg and trapping her in place. I ran from my hiding spot, drawing the creature's attention. It turned toward me, its branch-like antlers glowing with angry red light instead of the calm blue we'd seen before. As it charged, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Looking down, I saw a wooden tendril had pierced me from behind. Emerging from a tree I'd thought was ordinary, the tendril began to pulse, and I could feel something flowing into me, the beginning of the same transformation that had taken Kevin. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself along the tendril toward the central tree, dragging myself inch by painful inch toward the explosives. As the transformation spread through me, something strange happened. My mind connected briefly with the Grovekeeper's consciousness, a vast, ancient intelligence that thought in terms of centuries instead of minutes. In that moment, I saw its plan. It wasn't evil. It was desperate, trying to ensure the survival of its forest in a world growing increasingly hostile to ancient trees. But its methods were horrifying, and its alien mind had lost all empathy for individual human lives. Through our connection, it saw into my mind too, my lifetime of protecting these forests, my love for these ancient trees, and my horror at what it had done to preserve them. There was a moment of mutual understanding, perhaps even regret. Then, with the wooden transformation spreading through my chest toward my heart, I reached the explosives and pulled the matchbook from my pocket. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to the Grovekeeper or to the forest itself. The last thing I remember was the flare of the match, the Grovekeeper's cry of rage and fear, and a feeling like the entire forest was holding its breath. Then everything went white. I shouldn't have survived, but somehow I did. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 weeks after the explosion, with burns across my chest and arms. The doctors called it a miracle. They couldn't explain how I'd made it out of the forest with such severe injuries, or how I'd been found at the ranger station despite having no memory of walking there. They also couldn't explain the strange patterns under my skin, faint lines that looked like tree rings, slowly fading day by day. Dr. Chen survived too, though she lost her leg below the knee. When we finally spoke, we agreed on what to tell authorities: a forest fire, an equipment accident. Who would believe the truth? "What about Kevin?" I asked her. She just shook her head. No one had found any trace of him. For 3 months, the forest remained closed to the public due to environmental hazards. When I was finally well enough to return to duty, I requested a patrol of the area where it had all happened. What I found was both reassuring and unsettling. The trees were just trees. Again, no movement, no patterns of growth that couldn't be explained by natural processes. The explosion had destroyed the central tree completely. leaving only a blackened crater where it once stood. But the forest had changed. The trees grew in subtly different patterns now, their branches reaching in ways I'd never noticed before. And the animals behaved strangely around certain groves, avoiding them completely, as if sensing something humans couldn't. I found the first tree, still standing majestically in its clearing. Inside its hollow trunk, someone had carved a simple message: "The forest remembers." It wasn't Kevin's handwriting. It wasn't mine. I checked with Dr. Chen later. It wasn't hers either. As summer turned to fall, tourists returned to the park. None of them noticed anything unusual. They snapped photos of the giant redwoods, hiked the familiar trails, and marveled at trees that had stood for thousands of years. Only I saw the differences, the way certain saplings grew several inches overnight, the way ferns seemed to turn to follow visitors as they passed, the way the forest seemed more aware. The new park rangers assigned to replace Kevin noticed something odd too. Throughout the forest, my name appeared carved into trees. Not vandalism. The carvings seemed to emerge from within the wood itself, like knots naturally forming my name, Henry Sullivan. At first it was just a few trees near the ranger station, then more appeared along the trails, then throughout the entire forest. Most disturbing of all, each carving gradually transformed over weeks into a knot that resembled a human face, my face, watching silently as visitors passed beneath the ancient canopy. Dr. Chen came to visit me one last time before taking a research position across the country. "Have you noticed any changes?" she asked carefully. "In yourself?" I knew what she meant, the dreams I'd been having. Dreams where I could feel roots spreading beneath the soil, sense water flowing up through wooden vessels, feel sunlight transforming into energy through countless leaves. Dreams where I could see through 1,000 eyes throughout the forest. Watching, waiting. "No," I lied. "Nothing unusual." She didn't believe me, I could tell, but she also didn't press further. "The Grovekeeper wanted forests that could survive," she said quietly. "Forests that could adapt. Maybe it got what it wanted, just not the way it expected." I retired the following spring, but I didn't leave. I built a small cabin at the edge of the park where I could keep watch on the forest. Or perhaps where the forest could keep watch on me. Sometimes, on foggy mornings, I walk among the ancient redwoods and feel a presence moving just out of sight. Not threatening, not anymore. Just watching, learning, waiting. And sometimes when I place my hand against the bark of the first tree, I swear I can feel Kevin's consciousness there, changed but not gone, and others too. The missing loggers, the tribal shaman, perhaps. Even fragments of the Grovekeeper itself, all merged into something new. Something that's neither fully human nor fully plant. Something that remembers what it's like to walk on two legs and think with a human mind, but also knows the patient wisdom of trees that measure time in centuries. The forest is changing, adapting in ways too subtle for most people to notice. But I notice, and I wonder, was this the Grovekeeper's plan all along? Not to transform itself, but to transform us. I watch young rangers guide tourists through the park, pointing out the largest trees, explaining their age and importance. None of them mention the strange growth patterns, or the knots that look like faces, or the way the forest feels different now, but the forest remembers. And so do I. Whatever the explosion destroyed that day, it wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. A new kind of forest, a new kind of guardian. And on nights when the moon is full and the mist rolls in from the sea, I sometimes catch glimpses of something moving between the massive trunks. Something with a deer-like shape and skin like bark. But its antlers don't glow blue or red anymore. They glow green, like new leaves in spring. And I don't run. I don't hide. I simply watch as it watches me. Two guardians of the ancient trees, each understanding the other at last. The forest has roots deeper than any of us knew, roots that reach not just through soil, but through time, through consciousness itself. Roots of terror, yes, but also roots of something else, something new, something that's only just beginning to grow.